racism and the legacy of racism in Princeton, New Jersey. Paul Robeson, who was born in Princeton, called it the northernmost town in the South. And he moved out at the age of 6 with his family, but through friends and family, he maintained connections with that town throughout his life. And there was no doubt that Princeton was a racist town. Blacks were not allowed in movie theaters, stores, other public facilities they were excluded from. The public school system in Princeton was not even integrated until 1948. And when it was integrated, Harold Dodds, who was then the president of Princeton University, voiced some anger about how this school integration was destroying local customs and an infringement upon the government on the town of Princeton. Now, I always knew that, or I had this image of Princeton as this conservative, starchy kind of school, and to me that connotates some level of racism. But I was stunned when I really began to look at it to see the central role that Princeton University played in perpetuating racism in that town. To say that there were few black students in the history of Princeton University is almost a ridiculous understatement. Princeton's one of the oldest schools in the country. It started out as a college in New Jersey and moved to Princeton in 1756. Virtually, it took 200 years before the first black undergrad matriculated through that school. John Leroy Howard graduated in 1947. So that surprised me. The other thing about Princeton was, just like most the traditional southern towns and cities, they were dependent on a huge black servant class. There were cooks, maids, laborers, you name it. Black people did it. And therefore, they always had a large black population. And as I looked into it, I was amazed at the richness of the black culture and history in that town. I'll talk about one person, Betsy Stockton. Her mother was a slave named Celia, and her father was a white man named Robert Stockton, who actually came from one of the richest and probably the most prominent family in that town. Betsy Stockton, as a youth, had a very difficult, her mother abandoned her. She was raised by the Stocktons, and she had a really difficult childhood. She ended up traveling and being a missionary. But her calling was as a teacher. And she eventually came back to Princeton, established a school for black children and also taught black adults. And this school became a prototype of a school called the Witherspoon School for Colored Children, which was a phenomenal institution in Princeton's black community. It was known for its academic excellence and lasted over 100 years. So, to me, Einstein's anti-racism in the context of Princeton and its history was even more meaningful and dramatic.
Context of White Supremacy. Rodger Taylor putting things in context. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, June 25th, 2020. So I have been told this is our second study session on Rodger Taylor, black male, Fred Jerome, suspected racist, their book, Einstein on Race and Racism. We got through the first 3 chapters last week, and I picked that audio segment specifically because last week some of our astute readers said, hey man, we're shucking and jiving, spending all this time talking about the history of Princeton and the old fox George Washington, all of his battle exploits and such. We're not even talking about Albert Einstein, and I thought that's from the C-SPAN interview that the authors did. And Mr. Taylor, he was asked, what was the thing that surprised you most? And he put Albert Einstein and him talking about racism in his work in the context of this is the environment that he came to, an environment staunch with racism, white supremacy, that really helped solidify white supremacy, racism throughout this world, throughout the country and the world. We talked about that. I mean, talking about all those U.S. senators and presidents who came through that institution. So I think that gave me a lot better understanding of why they spent so much of, I think it was chapter 3 last week, going into the history of the Princeton University. With that, we will get started. We're picking up on chapter 4. Our narrator, Mel, doing fantastic work down in California. Context of White Supremacy, again, Einstein on Race and Racism, audio segment 1.
Chapter 4, Witherspoon Street. When they came to Princeton to make the movie I.Q., a 1994 movie starring Walter Matthau as Einstein, I wanted to be in it. I remember dressing up all preppy and going for an audition. They ask you all these questions. I told them I used to take walks with Einstein, thinking that would get me in. They had one black person in the movie, a waitress. Shirley Satterfield, a longtime African-American resident of Princeton. In the fall of 1946, people in African-American communities caught up in the Levi Jackson craze flocked to cheer him on. Florence Taylor, then a Brooklynite, believes this may have been the year she and her husband went to Yale University to see a football game. Florence knew nothing about football, but remembers a packed house and the crowd going crazy chanting, "Levi, Levi," as the electrifying African-American running back, the star of Yale's team, busted color barriers and stereotypes. After the game, she and her husband drove down to Princeton to drop a friend off at home. Florence remembers that at one point in her friend's house there was a flurry of excitement. Everyone ran to the window. It was an Einstein sighting. Albert Einstein, the preeminent Princetonian, frequently used to walk down the block, which was in the heart of the black community. He looked like a very ordinary type person, Florence recalled, dressed casually, his hair was kind of all over the place. Although it has never been reported by his legion of biographers, Einstein spent a good deal of his walking, talking time in Princeton's African-American community. He felt comfortable here, black Princetonian Henry Pinnell explains. We treated him like an ordinary person. More than half a century later, memories of Einstein still resonate among residents of the community, whether it was sitting on a neighbor's porch or a neighbor's steps, giving candy to a group of kids, a conversation here, a friendship there, a laugh. Einstein made himself part of their journey down Witherspoon Street. Below, a number of black Princetonians share their memories. Callie Caraway Sinkler says, "When we were girls, me and my sister, Lily Taylor, used to watch Einstein walking up Witherspoon Street, the main street in Princeton's black community. See, he cut across from his home on Mercer Street, so he would walk up on Witherspoon going to the hospital." Morris Boyd says, "Yes, I saw Einstein, often walking on Mercer Street, sweater hanging down, sandals. We heard that Einstein's stepdaughter wanted to give him a car, but he preferred walking." Penny Edwards Carter says, "I remember Einstein riding his bicycle and also walking down the street in the early 1950s, giving us kids candy." Fannie Floyd, "Well, I used to see Einstein on Nassau Street. Usually he was walking on the side of the cemetery." Lloyd Banks, "Einstein was unusual for a white person to a degree. He wasn't bothered being in the black community. We would run out. As children, we always ran out and talked to him, and he would stop and talk to us. We would be shouting, 'Dr. Einstein, Dr. Einstein,' and he would stop and take a few minutes with us. He took the time to talk to us. He was very friendly. It seemed as though it was almost every day or at least every week. He always walked. Rod Pinnell. He used to stand on the corner of Jackson and John Streets. We lived just 2 doors in on Jackson. I remember his khakis and sweatshirt, and sometimes he'd stand on that corner for quite a time, pondering the universe. He might have been thinking about the quantum theory or something like that. He was almost like a part of the community. Henry Pinnell. I agree. It was a place he could really feel free. Wallace Holland. I went to Einstein's house one day. I was thinking about what happened to the smoke from a fire or a cigarette when it goes up in the air and goes beyond us. Where did the smoke disappear to? I wondered about it and decided to go ask Albert Einstein. He probably could tell me. I didn't know anybody else who would be better to ask. I was 10 or 11 years old. I went to his house, everyone knew where he lived, and his sister opened the door. I said, I want to speak to Mr. Einstein. He wasn't at home, but I had no problem going by to see him. He was always talking with kids when he walked through the neighborhood. Note: Maya Einstein arrived in Princeton in 1939. She had been living with her husband in Italy until Mussolini gave in to pressure from Nazi Germany and adopted anti-Semitic policies in that country. In 1938, the wife and children of Einstein's cousin Robert were brutally murdered by Italian fascists while Robert was away from home. When he returned and found out what had happened to his family, he took his own life. Einstein immediately wrote to Maya in Florence and suggested that she come to visit him in America. She remained at Mercer Street House until her death in 1951. Tommy Hine says, well, I remember seeing Einstein when I was 12 or 13. It must have been around 1952. He would walk down John Street. He'd walk down Barclay's Ice and Coal Company, where he'd get an armful of wood and then walk back to his house. Shirley Satterfield. Or he'd be walking down John Street. He wouldn't be afraid to walk in the black community. Eric Craig. There was just no racism about him. He came from that kind of situation with what happened in Germany. I remember thinking that he must have experienced a terrible kind of race hatred against the Jews in Germany that made him more race-conscious than most white folks in Princeton. We were actually thrilled when we saw him because our parents had told us this was somebody important. He'd walk down Witherspoon Street every day. As children, we would run out. Our parents told us he was famous. He'd always spend time. That was back in 1942, 43, and 44. I remember his long hair. Evelyn Turner. He would walk slowly, with his hands behind his back. In those days, there was no buses going through town, just buses from Trenton that went down Nassau Street. Mercedes Woods. I was a little kid, about 9. I used to talk to him up on Nassau Street, up on the Common Square. He'd be sitting on the bench. He was a very nice man. He would have his hair uncombed, no stockings on, his shoes unlaced. He was a very funny man. I talked to him often. Einstein was very friendly. Albert Einstein lived in a house at 112 Mercer Street in Princeton. For most of that time, he shared it with his sister Maya, his stepdaughter Margot, and his secretary, Helen Dukas. One of the domestic workers they hired was Lily Trotman, who still lives in Princeton. Mrs. Trotman suffered a stroke in 2002 that has left her largely unable to talk, but her daughter, Mary Trotman, and granddaughter, Lena S. Sawyer, shared their recollections. Mary Trotman: my mother told me that Einstein helped pay for an African-American young man from Princeton to go to college. Another story Lily would tell is that Einstein would sometimes come home and find the front door locked, and forgetting that the back was open, would call the police. Lena S. Sawyer: my grandmother worked as a domestic for Einstein. She knew the details of his home life that were not part of what I'd been taught in school. When Professor Einstein had visitors, they sat and ate in the dining room. She listened from the kitchen. I remember that she said, he was a friend of black people, and he was a good man. Other details I remember were that he did not wear socks and that his wife was sick. I had a hard time understanding how she could characterize him as a good man and a friend to black people, since I remember I asked her if they ate together. For me, at age 22, this was a sign of someone being on equal relations and thus being good. I had a hard time reconciling that he could be good and still have her sit in the kitchen and eat. Anyway, I remember she laughed and said, of course she ate in the kitchen when he had other people over. She was, after all, his help. I do not remember her saying why exactly she characterized him as a good man, but she said that he was a Jew and had experienced hardships in Europe and could understand black people's situation. But how this was expressed, I do not know. For example, I wonder, did he give her better wages? Treat her with respect and dignity? Did he give her material things? I can remember in college my grandmother coming to me with clothes from one of her employers, Mrs. Overton. For my grandmother, this was a sign of kindness. However, when in my second year of grad school she wanted me to finally meet Miss Overton and thank her for these clothes, I had a hard time swallowing my anger at this woman. Fit and trim from her tennis and leisurely life, she called my grandmother Lily, and my grandmother called her Miss Overton. It was also clear in our meeting that my grandmother was in a lower position of power than Miss Overton. So I have a hard time understanding my grandmother's judgment of Einstein. What did she call him, I wonder? What did he call her? Along with their memories of Einstein walking through the African-American community, some of Princeton's black residents remember how they or their family members spent time with the scientist, chatting or strolling together. Paul Hines, from Paul Hines Leaves a Changing Field, July 16, 1985. I have lived among the eggheads. I sat down and talked to Dr. Einstein when I used to pick up garbage from him. I didn't just pick up the garbage and leave. I had to talk to the people, sit down and have a cup of coffee. Note, quote, I speak to everyone in the same way, whether he is a garbage man or the president of a university. Unquote. Einstein to Peter A. Bucky. Albert Hines. My brother Paul had a garbage company, and he picked up Einstein's trash. Einstein would invite him in often to talk. Timmy Hines. My father, Paul Hines, would talk with Einstein's sister Maya when he went by to pick up the trash. He worked at Bam Man's grocery store most of his life before he owned and operated a small garbage disposal company and picked up Einstein's garbage, among others. And I remember my father was a nature lover. He liked to read John McPhee, and he loved nature and flowers. When he was out collecting trash, he'd pick one flower from a lawn and transplant it to a pot in our yard. The next day he'd do it again with another flower, and pretty soon he had his own flower bed. He also played football in high school. Albert Hines. My sister, Violet Hines Jones, frequently worked for a family who were neighbors of the Einsteins. My sister and Einstein would hold hands and walk up Mercer Street daily. I learned that from my niece. Shirl Gadsden. My mother, Violet Hines Jones, was a member of the Friendship Club. Note: the Friendship Club, founded in 1932 by 6 leading women in Princeton's African-American community, helped students with scholarships, promoted arts and artists, sponsoring concerts by artists including Dorothy Maynard, Duke Ellington, Paul Robeson, and others, and provided aid for a variety of causes such as migrant farm workers in nearby communities. Founding members were Emma Ash Banks, Bertha Hill Brandon, Emma Green Epps, Carrie Dan Parnell, Lucy Ruffin, and Louise Skipworth. It was affiliated with the New Jersey State Confederation of Colored Women's Clubs and the NAACP. Her father was from British Guyana and worked at the university as a valet for the class of 1923. His picture is in that yearbook. Violet's mother was a Princetonian. They had 5 girls. My mother didn't tell me much about Einstein. She just said, I knew him. Once, talking about him, she said he was a great friend. She did tell me they used to meet each other after she got off from work. He was standing there, waiting at a certain spot. Then he'd say, we seem to meet at the same place every day. Sometimes he would say jokingly, we've got to stop meeting like this. Yes, we do. Well, we can walk together. What did you talk about? I asked her. We talked about the students, about the town. Well, maybe not every day, but frequently. Sometimes we only walked a block or 2 together. What did you call each other? I called him Mr. Einstein, and he called me Miss Hines. Then he started calling me Violet. She moved to Philadelphia. That's why they stopped seeing each other. When my mother died, we had a memorial service at Episcopalian Church. Uncle Albert Hines spoke there. He said, Violet was I'll use the term buddy of Albert Einstein. Henry Pennell. I guess everybody my age in this community remembers seeing Einstein when we were kids. He'd come by, white sneakers, no socks, a loose-fitting sweater, and he'd give nickels to us kids. I remember him coming up and sitting on my grandmother's porch and chatting with her. My grandmother, Carrie Dance Pennell, was a founding member of the Friendship Club. She lived on Jackson Street, right at the edge of the Witherspoon black community. Like if Einstein was walking from his place on Mercer Street to the hospital, which was and is still in the Witherspoon community, Jackson Street, it's now Paul Robeson Place, was the first street he would have to come to. Maybe a chance to rest before continuing on, maybe a chance to chat with friends, most likely both. My grandmother worked as a chef for the Nassau Club and was active in the Friendship Club, along with Emma Epps, Bertha Hill Brandon, and others. Einstein used to talk to everybody in our community. He didn't just come and sit on my grandmother's porch, but on the Wilsons' porch and others. He'd talk with everyone. As a boy, I always felt comfortable around him. I never really talked to Einstein, but I remember him walking in the community when I was a kid. And I was really great friends with his secretary, Helen Dukas. She was a wonderful lady. When I worked at the Institute for Advanced Study, the print shop was in the basement, and on the left was this huge room with a safe door on it. It was sort of a vault. Miss Dukas worked in that air-conditioned, heat-controlled room. She was working on Einstein's papers. All his papers were in there. This was after he had passed away, and they knew how valuable his papers were, so they kept them down there in that safe or vault. The door was a couple of foot-thick steel safe door. At the time, Miss Dukas's eyesight was failing, and she trusted me with the combination. Nobody else knew it, but I used to open the safe for her, because she couldn't do the combination. She treated me like one human being to another human being. McCarter Theater is the preeminent concert hall in Princeton. It was there that Einstein saw a 1937 performance by the great diva Marianne Anderson. Born into a poor South Philadelphia family, Anderson became one of the greatest voices in opera, but racism and segregation in America denied her a wide audience. When she was 6, she sang in the choir at the Union Baptist Church, but she did not take her first formal music lesson until she was 15, after her church raised the money for her. Like many black performers of that era, she could not build a reputation at home until she had performed abroad. So in 1930, the great contralto went overseas on a fellowship and soon took Europe by storm, drawing crowds and rave reviews in cities across the continent. The famous conductor, Arturo Toscanini, told her, "A voice like yours is heard once in 100 years." Princeton Group Arts, an organization that provided African-American youngsters with art instruction not available in their segregated Princeton school, sponsored Marianne Anderson's performance at McCarter. The concert was the brainchild of the group's leader, noted African-American artist Rex Gorley. Not surprisingly, her scintillating performance drew high praise in the Princeton press, complete artistic mastery of a magnificent voice. However, despite the accolades Anderson received, her international fame, and an overflow audience at McCarter, the African-American contralto was denied a room at Princeton's whites-only Nassau Inn. Albert Einstein promptly invited her to stay with him, Margot, and Helen Dukas. Elsa passed away in 1936. The diva accepted Einstein's offer, and their friendship continued for the rest of his life. Whenever she returned to Princeton, Marianne Anderson stayed at Einstein's house on Mercer Street. Albert Hines. I remember Marianne Anderson's concert at McCarter Hall. I was involved in that event, when she was refused a room at the Nassau Inn, and Einstein invited her to stay at his house with him and his daughter Margot. I was working with Rex Gorley and Spring Street Group Arts. Gorley was the director. Group Arts brought lots of African-American artists to Princeton. They brought Carmen McRae and Duke Ellington. But blacks did not stay in the hotels. Most went to Mrs. Hill's house and another rooming house, Mrs. Dickerson's, also on Green Street. In 1939, the Daughters of the American Revolution barred Mary Ann Anderson from singing at their Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. Instead, she gave a concert, arranged by Eleanor Roosevelt, at the Lincoln Memorial before more than 75,000 cheering people. Despite her world renown, it was not until January 1955 that Anderson was finally permitted to sing with New York's Metropolitan Opera. That same month, Princeton's Friendship Club brought her back for another concert at McCarter. The opera star decided to stay with her old friend Albert Einstein, who had only a few months left to live. When she left, she later wrote, "I knew this was really goodbye." Alice Satterfield. I worked in the kitchen at the Institute for Advanced Study in the early 40s for 3 to 5 years, and got to know Einstein. Shirley was in school, and I would be leaving the Institute to walk home. If I didn't get the bus and Professor Einstein would be walking, we'd walk together until we got to his residence. I'd bid him goodbye and continue home. We didn't talk a lot. On a couple of occasions he held my hand without saying anything. He would just walk in a silent and wonderful way in which you knew everything would be all right. You felt good walking with him. He did not look down on people. He was inspirational. Some of Miss Satterfield's friends says she is pretty inspirational herself. When she was younger, she decided to sit in the whites-only section of Princeton's movie house, the Garden Theater. Alice Satterfield. I just felt I'm going to do it anyway. We talked about breaking the taboos of racist seating and such, so I just sat where I wanted to in the Garden Theater. I remember it was Friday afternoon. They had programs for kids, and that day it was Rin Tin Tin, the movie dog. Colored were supposed to sit on one side. Instead, I sat in the white section. Nothing happened to me. Maybe I was lucky. I remember not being allowed into Balt Bakery. We weren't supposed to go in. Heck, there were lots of other stores on Nassau Street that were segregated too. I didn't like that kind of thing, so I'd go into Balt anyway. The Institute for Advanced Study had its own private bus that brought the workers, black and white, back to town. I often took that bus, and sometimes Einstein was on the same bus. He was a man of great warmth. Too bad there aren't more people like him. On those buses, you could sit where you wanted to sit. The Institute itself was filled with people from all over the world. A gentleman from India and I would sit together and ride until we got to Nassau Street. The Institute was integrated as far as foreigners and everyone. It was different from the university, which was segregated. Still, the Institute wasn't all that integrated. There was a definite class structure. Clearly, they didn't want people to mingle with the help. Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer would have a big party every year. I remember one professor got reprimanded for dancing with me. He said to me, "I don't understand why I cannot dance with you." I don't recall Einstein going to these parties. Miss Satterfield's story is not the only one about Dr. Oppenheimer and the Institute frowning on the fraternization between its scientists and those in lower-level positions, usually non-whites. Quote, I can tell you a true story about Griggs' black-owned restaurant in the late 1940s. Quote Freeman Dyson, the world-renowned theoretical scientist at the Institute, recalled. I ate supper there regularly with David Bohm, who was then at Princeton University. Note, Bohm, a brilliant scientist, was fired by Princeton President Harold Dodds in 1950 after he refused to name names before Senator Joseph McCarthy's inquisitors. Dodds' well-known anti-Semitism might well have been a factor in the ouster of Bohm, who was Jewish. Ham and cabbage was my favorite dish. I received a letter from K. Russell, who was Oppenheimer's secretary, saying it was inappropriate for a member of the Institute to be eating at Griggs'. Of course, I ignored the letter and continued eating at Griggs'. I never found out whether Oppenheimer instigated the letter or whether he knew about it. I rather suspect that Kay would not have sent it without his approval. Shirley Satterfield. Einstein didn't look down on people. I would often be with my mother in the Institute kitchen. Einstein would come in at lunchtime. I remember this man with all of this white hair. He was so nice. He'd take me for walks. I remember playing on the balcony and walking around the Institute with Einstein. I'd also go into his office with him. I'd say I was about 6 years old. I just remember he was very kind, and his hair was always, well, like he never combed his hair. He would just take me by the hand, walking with a cane in his other hand, and talk to me. I can't remember anything of what he said, but I remember that accent, and that he spoke really soft. He looked different because he had all that hair and wore sandals in all weather. He used to eat raw eggs, and I used to eat all the olives. They had big jars of olives in the Institute kitchen. They also fixed a bread pudding in that kitchen that I loved. I always used to eat in that kitchen and the cafeteria. My mother worked real hard, but when I came home, I would talk to my family. All of them took care of me. We lived with my grandmother and my 3 uncles who were all in the war, World War II. If my mother was out working, my aunt or grandma took care of me. Everybody knew everybody then. It was a close-knit neighborhood. We used to call going to Nassau Street going uptown. It was a big thing to go uptown, but there were certain places we couldn't go in, like a restaurant called Lahier's. Albert Hines. There was also a restaurant, Renwick's on Nassau Street, that barred black folks from eating there, even in the 1950s. Shirley Satterfield. And the Balt Bakery, like my mother said, we weren't allowed in there either. Besides the Garden Movie Theater, they had the Playhouse. It was so beautiful. The Playhouse backed onto Jackson Street where the black people lived. Now it's Paul Robeson Place. We used to go and sit there all Saturday and watch newsreels and cartoons and movies. I used to wonder why we always sat in the back on the right-hand side. I thought that was just where we always sat, but actually that's the only place we could sit. Einstein Light to the Power of 2. A 1-hour television show was written, produced, and directed by Raymond Story, Richard Mozer, and David Devine in 1997. Though they did not base their story on real people, nor had they done any research in Princeton, much of what they produced eerily echoes the truth. Einstein meets a young African-American girl named Lanny Willis, who is doing her homework on Princeton's campus. The scientist gains Lanny's trust by rebuffing 2 white college students who, in a scene full of racial implications, roughly tell her she has no business on the campus because it's private property. Later, in exchange for some gumdrops, Einstein agrees to help Lanny with her homework. She and Einstein become friends. We find that Lanny is the only black kid in her class. Her white teacher is negative, condescending, and makes comments like, "You belong in vocational school." She wants to send Lanny to a remedial class. In a meeting with the teacher, Lanny's mother, realizing that the remedial class is nothing but a dumping ground for black students, angrily rejects her suggestion. Lanny remains in the classroom, but her confidence is shattered. Einstein encourages her by recounting how he did not like school when he was her age, and by insisting that she's just as smart as everybody else. The movie climaxes at a science fair in which Lanny is to make a critical, in terms of her grade, presentation. Einstein makes an unannounced visit, and Lanny's parents are pleasantly surprised. The world-famous scientist walks into the classroom first, and Lanny's flabbergasted, star-struck teacher, Miss Fitch, immediately recognizes him. "Wow, Dr. Einstein, I'm so happy to see you. I teach the 4th grade." "Oh, so you must be Miss Fitch," Einstein replies. She is thrilled that he knows her name. He asks if she can take his coat. She happily does, and Einstein says, "And yes, you can also take," he points to Lanny's parents, "their coats as well. We're all together." Lanny, of course, makes an A+ presentation. Like the typical TV ending, things wind up happily, but the point about racism is cogently made. "It really sounds like the way schools were here," says Shirley Satterfield, speaking about her educational experience in Princeton. The New Jersey legislature passed a law in 1947 that made segregation in public schools illegal. "I believe Princeton was the last town to integrate educationally in New Jersey," says physicist Freeman Dyson, whose children began attending public school there in 1948. The Princeton Plan for School Reorganization also began in 1948. The Princeton Plan was quite simple. The all-white Nassau Street School accepted all children from kindergarten through 5th grade, and all children from 6th to 8th grade went to the former Witherspoon School for Colored Children, which was renamed the John Witherspoon Middle School. Howard B. Maxwood, who had been the principal at Witherspoon School since 1936, was retained as principal of the new middle school. He was the first and only black principal of an integrated school in Princeton until he retired in 1968. For black Princetonians, the Princeton Plan had an unexpected consequence. It brought about the demise of the remarkable educational institution, the Witherspoon School for Colored Children. Alice Satterfield and Albert Hines are graduates of the Witherspoon School, as is Mr. Hines' mother, class of 1894. "We were ahead of some white kids who went to Princeton High School as far as spelling and diction," says Satterfield. "They drummed it into your head, and if they didn't get it in the first year, they kept you back the second year. They taught us manners. They taught us love." Alice Satterfield's mother, Annie Van Zandt, taught at Witherspoon School, and one of her students was Paul Robeson. The old school building still exists, according to Hines. A nursing home is now there. Other unforeseen issues arose in the African-American Witherspoon Street community as a result of the Princeton Plan. That September, black parents quickly found that their children were summarily being put in remedial classes and steered into vocational programs. Insulted and outraged by this policy, they met with public school administrators and demanded that their children receive equal treatment. Though the officials technically acceded to their request, this was the beginning of a long, difficult struggle for African Americans in Princeton's public school system. The Princeton Plan did little to alter community racial attitudes. Most black students continued to lead segregated lives within school. They were met with low expectations from teachers and discouraged from participating in extracurricular activities. Shirley Satterfield and Henry Pennell were among the first black students to experience the Princeton Plan. They were both in the 3rd grade and still bear some scars. "When they integrated schools, they let us down educationally," says Pennell. "In 3rd grade, we were laughing about something," recalls Satterfield. One of the kids said, "Look at Shirley blush." And the teacher said, "Shirley can't blush. She's a Negro." Chapter 5. Einstein and Robeson 1. If Einstein had moved to Princeton a quarter-century earlier, one of the youngsters he might have met while walking along Witherspoon Street was a tall, athletic, sharp-witted pre-teenager named Paul Robeson. It is easy to imagine them walking and talking together, much as Einstein did several decades later with 11-year-old Harry Morton. Einstein, eager to learn about his new friend's world, the young Robeson proudly talking about his oldest brother Bill, who was studying in Philadelphia to become a doctor, and his father, who escaped from slavery in North Carolina at the age of 15, then helped the Union Army in the Civil War, and later became a minister and moved to Princeton to work at the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church for 21 years. Then, the white people in charge fired him. In fact, by the time Einstein arrived in Princeton in 1933, Robeson was long gone. After moving to nearby Somerville, where his father built and led the AME Zion Church, young Robeson graduated from Somerville High School and won a scholarship to Rutgers, a private, overwhelmingly white college at the time. A straight-A student for 4 years, Robeson was also a member of the varsity debating team, literary society, and one of only 8 Rutgers students elected to Phi Beta Kappa in both his junior and senior years. He also earned an astonishing 15 varsity athletic letters, but his most famous achievement came in football where, despite initial racist brutality against him from teammates, Robeson of Rutgers became a gridiron legend. The New York Tribune's report on Rutgers' game against a heavily favored Naval Reserve team, boasting All-American players from a dozen top colleges, almost sounds like an allegory about Robeson's later life. A tall, tapering Negro in a faded crimson sweater, moleskins, and a pair of maroon socks ranged hither and yon on a wind-whipped flatbush field yesterday afternoon. He rode the wings of the frigid bridges, a grim, silent, and compelling figure. Whether it was Charlie Barrett, of Old Cornell and All-American fame, or Gariah or Gardner, who tried to hurl himself through the line, he was met and stopped by this blaze of red and black. The Negro was Paul Robeson of Rutgers College, and he is a minister's son. He is also 19 years of age and weighs 200 pounds. It was Robeson, a veritable Othello of battle, who led the dashing little Rutgers 11 to a 14-0 victory over the widely heralded Newport Naval Reserves. Ignoring his father's advice that he become a minister, Robeson earned a law degree from Columbia, helping to pay the tuition by playing professional football between semesters. He had also been accepted by Harvard Law School, but chose Columbia because he wanted to live in Harlem, where the Harlem Renaissance was in its early stages. Racism encountered in his first law office quickly helped Robeson decide to change careers, and he went on to become a world-famous singer and actor, and later a political activist. By the mid-1930s, he had won critical acclaim for performances throughout the United States and Europe, including his stage portrayals of Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones and, in London, Shakespeare's Othello. Robeson's attitude toward Princeton as he traveled the world was similar, in many respects, to the way the young Einstein had viewed his boyhood home. Einstein had escaped from German militarism and anti-Semitism, while Robeson described the Princeton he left behind as a Georgia plantation town, and spiritually located in Dixie. But, for Robeson, there were two Princetons. The African Americans in the Witherspoon community where he was raised were hard-working people, and poor, most of them, in worldly goods, but how rich in compassion. They lived, he said, a much more communal life than the white people around them, and he would not forget his roots. I had the closest of ties with Princeton's black workers since many of my father's relatives, Uncle Ben, Uncle John, Cousin Caraway, Cousin Chance, and others, had come to this town and found employment at such jobs. Domestics in the homes of the wealthy, cooks, waiters, and caretakers at the university, coachmen for the town, and laborers at nearby farms and brickyards. When Robeson was at Rutgers and Columbia, he used to come back and sing for us at church concerts, according to one member of Princeton's Witherspoon Church congregation. It is not surprising, then, that in October 1935, having just returned to America from another successful stint on the European stage, and on his way to Hollywood for a highly publicized and lucrative filming of The Emperor Jones with concert stops, en route in New York, Chicago, Milwaukee, Portland, and Seattle, the now renowned Robeson found time or made time to travel to Princeton for a concert at the McCarter Theater to benefit the Black YMCA. Located in a small wood-frame building on Witherspoon Street, the Y was forever desperate to fund programs in the arts, sports, and education for the children in Robeson's old neighborhood. Einstein had most likely read about Robeson before they eventually met in Princeton. Their paths first crossed in Berlin in 1930, where Robeson gave 2 performances of The Emperor Jones. The Nazis had not yet taken power, although armed fascist gangs were increasingly violent in the streets of Germany and across Europe. Robeson had recently concluded a successful concert tour of European cities where, according to one report, his tumultuous, unprecedented receptions became anti-fascist demonstrations. In Berlin, the German media, especially the Social Democratic press, which Einstein read regularly, hailed Robeson in The Emperor Jones, even as they disparaged O'Neill's play. While he missed seeing the play, Einstein could hardly avoid the rave reviews over Robeson's photos. The most obvious explanation for Einstein's passing up The Emperor Jones in 1930 is simply that his English was not good enough. 10 years later, he would see the play in Princeton. By then, he would know English better, and he would know Robeson. Einstein and Robeson may not have met each other face-to-face in Berlin, but they both met the face of New Germany. Einstein had frequently endured anti-Semitic attacks in the media, crank letters, and death threats. But more terrifying was the scene of May 10, 1933, in the Unter den Linden Square facing Berlin's Opera House. Though he no longer lived in Germany, Einstein heard enough vivid accounts of the event to feel the chill. Some 5,000 frenzied swastika-wearing Nazi youths tossed thousands of books into bonfires, shouting, Brin, burn, Karl Marx, Brin Freud. They also burned the works of Thomas Mann, Erich Maria, Remarque, André Gide, Helen Keller, Upton Sinclair, and other Nazi-designated communist literature, including the books on the Jewish theory of relativity by Albert Einstein. A crowd of some 40,000 Berliners stood and watched and cheered. William Shirer later called it a scene that has not been witnessed in the Western world since the late Middle Ages. For Robeson, the new Germany appeared on a platform at Berlin's Central Railroad station a year and a half later, on December 21, 1934, as he stood with Marie Seton, biographer of the Soviet filmmaker Sergei Einstein, while his wife, Eslanda, went to check on the luggage. The three, on their way to Moscow, where Robeson planned to make a film, had stopped in Berlin to change trains. When an elderly German woman saw the black man and white woman together, she stopped staring just long enough to report her sighting to three men in Nazi uniforms, who turned to look in Robeson's direction. "I could read the hatred in their eyes," he told a German newspaper many years later. It reminded him of a lynch mob, and he remembered his older brother Reeve telling him, "If you have to go, take one with you." I took a step forward, and they could read something in my eyes. The uniformed men walked away. And when Essie returned, the three travelers boarded their train to Moscow. For a long time after the train moved out of Berlin, Seton later wrote, Paul sat hunched in the corner of the compartment, staring out into the darkness. Their first certain meeting came on October 31st, 1935, in Princeton, when Einstein went backstage after Robeson's concert at the McCarter Theater. It is easy to envision Helen Dukas, Einstein's longtime assistant, returning from shopping with the Daily Princetonian and showing Einstein, Elsa, and Margot the front-page story about the performance they had missed seeing in Berlin, who would be singing that evening in Princeton. The article, surrounding a handsome smiling photo, ran under the headline, "Robeson, brilliant baritone and actor, will present spirituals in Homecoming." One can imagine, too, the household gathered in the living room as Helen reads aloud to the others, translating some words into German, baritone, actor, scholar, athlete, and lawyer. Paul Robeson of Princeton returns to his birthplace tonight when he will sing spirituals on the McCarter Theater stage at 8:15 in his only New Jersey appearance of the year. The proceeds of the concert are for the benefit of the Witherspoon YMCA. Tickets are priced from $2.20 to $1.10. Winning at Rutgers letters in football, baseball, basketball, and track, a Phi Beta Kappa key, a 90% scholastic average, and the reputations of being the greatest defensive end that ever trod the gridiron, and the perfect type of college man. Robeson continued his career with a law course at Columbia. From the days of Emperor Jones to present times, Paul Robeson has performed before packed houses in all the large cities of this country and in the capitals of Europe. He created a sensation as the Moor in Shakespeare's Othello in a London production in the spring of 1930, when English and New York critics filled their papers with columns of praise. Robeson was the first Negro to act in the role since the days of Ira Aldridge 49 years ago. It is in the rhythm, exultation, emotion, simplicity, and beauty of his great voice that Robeson attains the high degree of perfection which is felt when he sings such spirituals and Negro songs as Old Man River, Deep River, Water Boy, and Were You There? Later, backstage after the concert, Einstein, still energetic at 56, reached out a hand to shake Robeson's hand. The singer, taller, broader, and 19 years younger, and celebrated around the world, was awed. "I am honored," he began in his deep, gentle voice, but Einstein interrupted, "No, it is I who feel honored." According to his friend and colleague Lloyd Brown years later, when Robeson described the meeting, the awe was still in his voice. Besides the evening's concert, the two men discussed their mutual alarm at recent world events. Within the prior 6 weeks, the Nazi regime in Germany had issued the Nuremberg Laws, canceling citizenship for Jews and outlawing marriage or sexual relations between Jews and non-Jews, and Mussolini's troops had brought Italian fascism to Africa by invading Ethiopia. In their brief first meeting, Einstein and Robeson discovered they shared not only a passion for music, but a hatred for fascism. Within a year, both men joined the international effort to defend the democratically elected government of Spain from Francisco Franco's fascist armies. The Princetonian's laudatory front-page pre-write for Robeson's concert indicated his phenomenal popularity in 1935, but the reasons for that popularity were made clearer in the next morning's review. Paul Robeson thrills McCarter audience with rich tones and warm personality. A rendering of Negro songs, both spiritual and secular, better than any of those with which Paul Robeson thrilled his audience in last night's magnificent concert in McCarter's, would have been hard to find. Though the effects of a cold were plainly audible in his voice, they were quickly forgotten when the deep richness of his tones and his irresistible personality took hold of the listeners. What gives to Robeson's singing its peculiar potency is the amazing extent to which he is able to live what he sings, to put himself into his songs. In the best numbers, he actually seems to become the song. His whole body reacts to it. He walks about the stage, taps his foot in time to the rhythm, and in still other ways expresses the composition. Yet he never comes near being sentimental, and brings a true greatness of interpretation to his more serious numbers. The spell which he casts over the audience in Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, Go Down Moses, and to some extent in Waterboy, was indeed a profound one. The first mentioned in particular made the most moving impression upon this reviewer. If he had seen the Einstein-Robeson meeting after the concert, the Princetonian reviewer might have added a footnote to his story. But to avoid curiosity seekers, Princeton's most recognizable resident probably waited until almost everyone else had gone before making his way backstage. In fact, whenever Einstein attended McCarter, the theater management arranged to sneak him in the audience 15 minutes early and keep the lights dimmed so he wouldn't be battered by admirers and newsmen. Einstein and Robeson met for a second time during the week of August 12th through 17th, 1940, when Robeson played the Emperor Jones at McCarter, and again at McCarter in August 1942, when Robeson did Othello with Uta Hagen and Jose Ferrer. For Princeton, the McCarter Theater was one of those strange contradictions that appear occasionally in America's racial attitudes. It was similar to the paradox of millions of white people hailing Jackie Robinson's entry into white baseball in 1946, while during the same year they shrugged as scores of black Americans were lynched. Here was a theater in a town modeled on Mississippi values, a town that didn't enter the 20th century until it was half over, dominated by a university whose decision-makers kept their white hands clutching the old supremacy myth and kept their schools, stores, and movie theaters segregated well into the 1940s. Yet, because McCarter was privately owned, it was not bound by the biases of Princeton town or gown, and seeking financially successful events could host Robeson and Marian Anderson in sold-out, critically acclaimed performances before standing-room-only, racially integrated audiences. Einstein could not have known it when he visited backstage, but for Robeson, there was a special irony in performing Othello in Princeton, after Broadway theaters had already rejected it as racially too risky. Margaret Webster, the British producer, reported that every New York theater manager she approached was afraid of a production in which a black man made love to a white woman. Quote, "Mostly they were just plain scared of the issues which the production would raise." Unquote. When Webster and Robeson decided to try to open the play in a theater outside New York, they found only two who agreed to take it, the Battle Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the McCarter. So the Kiss that couldn't play on Broadway succeeded in the same town whose high school and university had barred Robeson and his brothers, the same town where Reverend Robeson's militancy had cost him his church. A year later, after its out-of-town opening won rave reviews, Othello opened in New York at the Shubert Theater for a run of 296 performances, a record for a Shakespeare production on Broadway. For Robeson, the taste of irony may have been bittersweet, given the Jim Crow conditions his cousins, friends, and others still faced in Princeton's black community. Quote, "It means so little when a man like me wins some success," he told a reporter from Wisconsin. "Where is the benefit when a small class of Negroes makes money and can live well? It may all be encouraging, but it has no deeper significance. I feel this way because I have cousins who can neither read nor write. I have had a chance. They have not. That is the only difference." And contradiction or not, Princeton was still Princeton. A black man whose mother worked in several of the homes in the university reported that when Othello came to town, his mother overheard at parties much discussion about the fact that in the McCarter Theater, Paul Robeson kissed a white woman. It was a play, but they could not accept that, and they showed their Southern upbringing and their Southern attitudes. To Alice Satterfield and her daughter Shirley, Paul Robeson was almost part of the family. "My grandparents, Waymond and Martha Van Zandt, lived on Edge Hill Street," Alice says. "My granddaddy had his own house. My mother, Annie, was a school teacher. She taught at Witherspoon School for Colored Children, and one of her students was Paul Robeson. Paul's father was minister of our church for 21 years. That was a time of deep Jim Crowism, and his father was always fighting for the rights of Negroes." Shirley recalls after Paul Robeson left Princeton, he used to come back to see my grandma, Annie, and when he came, he used to sit me on his lap and tell me stories. I remember his deep voice. He used to come back and have concerts at McCarter Theater. He was a loved man, but I think he became bitter because Princeton was a Jim Crow town. He loved the people in the community, he just questioned how people were treated. He left town because of the way he was treated. When Robeson played Othello at McCarter Theater, Shirley recalls, he was wonderful with that big booming voice. Paul would come to Princeton because his relatives lived on Green Street, and he would make the rounds. He would always be walking, he'd stop at our house, he would go on down to Birch Avenue. As kids, we'd heard about him, and we would run behind him to the corner. We had all heard about him. We knew he was someone great. Then, when he played Othello, we went to see it, and we were just thrilled. There must have been a sense of reunion in the air when Einstein came backstage after Robeson's Othello performance in mid-August 1942. Robeson, anticipating the arrival of the great professor, now his old friend and regular backstage visitor in Princeton, and Einstein eagerly looking forward to another chat with the warm and brilliant star who shared so much of his worldview. Perhaps they embraced when they met. This reunion, however, had a somber tone. The anti-fascist struggle, so central in each of their lives, had failed to stop Franco in Spain, and now there was a world war. Less than a year after their first backstage meeting in October 1935, when Einstein and Robeson had shared their concern about the rising fascist tide in Europe, Francisco Franco's troops, with planes and tanks provided by Hitler and Mussolini, attacked the Popular Front government of Spain, which included socialists and communists. For the next 3 years, support for the Spanish Republic became a central cause for both Robeson and Einstein, a cause that brought them into conflict with the Roosevelt administration's foreign policy of neutrality. Washington's neutrality barred sending arms or troops to either side, but permitted Texaco to sell oil to Germany and Italy, oil that fueled the planes dropping bombs on hundreds of Spanish towns. One of those bombing raids became a symbol for a new kind of war, in which men miles high in the sky drop death and terror on civilians they cannot and do not want to see.
Context of White Supremacy. That is audio segment 1. We will pick up. We are still in chapter 5, and we will pick up kind of at the midpoint. For me, this is the midpoint of page 60, and the paragraph starts, April 26, 1937 was market day in the small Basque town of Guernica. Glad I don't have to narrate this one and go get all these wacky cities around the world. But April 26, 1937, blah, blah, blah. That's where we'll start at on page 60. Still in chapter 5 for audio segment number 2. Just make a little note. Make a note myself so I'll know where we will pick up at. Bang. Alrighty. Number to dial if you have thoughts, observations, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Wow, I had a hearty chuckle. They talked about book burning, the Nazis in Germany burning Albert Einstein and other books, so-called Jews. Get that stuff out of here, Karl Marx and all the rest of it. Get it out of here, doing their Fahrenheit 451. We have not read that book in the book club, although it was voted on. Kid you not, I did book burning myself today, right before the program went live, and I even have pictures to evidence. I would not have said anything about that, but I had not read ahead. I did not know that they were going to be talking about book burning in this week's section of the book. Wow. Just before we went live, I don't even know if it's been a complete hour, but the coals are probably still smoldering. Anywho, what are the odds? Let's see. Anything else before we get to the listeners? I hope people check out the full interview with Rodger Taylor and Fred Jerome. Rodger Taylor, Fred Jerome on C-SPAN. Has a lot of interesting tidbits. We'll probably play another one next week because I still haven't even played the segment where the audience member asks about the definition for racism, which was very juicy. Play that one next week, but make sure you check that out. And Fred Jerome, who is the white co-author, he has a number of different articles also talking about this same subject, Einstein, racism. You can see a number of different reports online that he's authored as well. Alrighty, let's see. First few folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, commentary to share, line should be open. Feel free. Maybe folks are still processing from the first section or getting themselves in a spot where they can chit-chat. I'll read a few notes and then check again. Let's see. Oh, there's B in Toronto. Let's see. Greetings, B in Toronto.
Hi, Gus. Good evening to you and callers and listeners. What I found was really remarkable was in relation to Paul Robeson. I actually have an old record of his. I'm actually looking at it right now. And I never knew that he had a law degree, went to Harvard. I never knew any of that information. So it was very insightful. And it also reminded me of how much Black people, in terms of education, earn, but because of the system of white supremacy, are forced to go into other professions that would stereotypically be open to Black people, such as arts and entertainment, or sports, or social services or customer service retail. It was just interesting how, even though he was acclaimed, it was a shame that he wasn't able to also be the lawyer that he worked so hard to study for. Thank you, and I leave the line.
Much obliged to be in Toronto. Dr. Gerald Horne, who should be visiting us next Tuesday. He's written many, many books, but he also wrote a biography on Paul Robeson. We read in the book club kind of towards the end of last year, but has lots of information, and he's such an impressive person in terms of just his academic accomplishments and entertainment accomplishments, and he studied all those languages. I just remember being very impressed getting more information, because I didn't know a whole lot about him either until we read his biography. It would be easy to see why a person like Mr. Robeson would be neutralized. COINTELPRO and all of that. I'm sure they'll get to more of that as we roll. But yeah, great book by Dr. Horne, and he should be on the program coming up soon. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, proceed.
Can I be heard?
Greetings, Henry in Chicago.
Greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners. In the interview before you started the audiobook of the book, the audiobook with the what you do on the show with I think it was Rodger Taylor, the non-white black co-author of the book. He mentioned he was talking about Betsy Stockton, and I remember we read the chapter on her last weekend. He mentioned about, I guess he mentioned a little bit about her history. And he mentioned, and I don't think this was in the last chapter that we read, but she said that her mother abandoned her. Now, we remember that Betsy Stockton's mother was the non-white black woman who was a slave, and her father was the rapist white man. But I may be wrong, but I kind of find it hard to believe that in a situation, especially in slavery, that mothers would abandon their children. I am suspected to believe that, the baby was probably taken away from her because she had no right to that baby in a system of slavery, much less white supremacy. So I might be wrong, but who knows? But I just kind of don't find it logical in that sense of the woman abandoning a child in that situation. In the chapter where they were getting the information from the Princeton, the Black Princeton residents, Lena Sawyer seemed like she was the least confused in regards to her encounters with Einstein. I know she was talking about how everybody was calling Einstein a friend of black people and everything, and she just was like, looking at his habits was like, I don't understand how he's she said that I had a hard time reconciling how he could be good and still have to sit in the kitchen with her to eat, I guess referring to his help. So she seemed like the least confused among the black people in regards to Einstein. Didn't give so much accolades like the other ones did. So she kind of was very reserved on that. Black children being put in remedial classes in the Princeton Plant School. Sounds like the modern public school now, putting children in special ed and, just letting them fall by the wayside. That made for TV, that was mentioned, Einstein, Light to the Power of Two. Oh my God, how, what was so interesting, I was reading and I just kept, okay, so when in the story does Einstein take the young black girl under her wing, and I did not see that. So I just I just had to laugh at that because that is just so typical. And obviously it was probably white people that wrote that story in regards to that. You know, Einstein being friendly to black people, but cannot give the black girl the information. She had to do everything on her own. And also the chapter with Robeson. Robeson faced racist brutality against teammates while playing football. You mentioned Gerald Horn, who will be on the show. I remember that being in the book. And in that book, you know, it was more explicit in regards to how his teammates used to do illegal tackling, as it will be called now, and probably illegal back then, probably, you know, looking to kill Robeson on the football field. So, but that's all I have. I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Henry in Chicago. Superb point about the word abandoned. During the introductory segment, that was Rodger Taylor, co-author, blackmail victim. But yeah, that's good point. A good point. You probably cannot be accurately charged with abandonment if you technically do not have any rights to that child to begin with. And even that, like last week, I was saying, like Celia, that's the person that was charged with abandonment. This black mom slave. We were saying last week, you know, what happened to her? Did she get caught, or did she make it? Did she have some arrangement to try to get it? I mean, it's just, she wouldn't be able to abandon her anyway, because she doesn't have any rights to do that. But regardless, like, I don't even have enough information to accurately even grasp what happened. And then she tried her best to try to get away from a terrorist slave plantation, as any right-minded person would try to do if they could. Anyway, and yes, there was a lot more explicit detail about Paul Robeson and all the abuse that he experienced throughout his life, particularly the football part throughout his life, but yes, the football part at Rutgers and all of that. Lots of disgusting information, them stomping on his hands, and yeah, savage, brain damage. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up, if we've missed you totally, line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Gus. This is Miss C. Hello, all of the listeners. I had several comments, but I'll just keep my comments very short. It was interesting in Chapter 4 how they showed how black people were treated by Einstein and how he treated them, or how they treated him, versus how white people typically interacted with Einstein. The book points out several times that white people tended to look at Einstein as though he was the genius and someone to be revered. But in Chapter 4, many of the people, they mention that we treated Einstein like he was an ordinary person. I think that was on page 35. And Einstein also mentioned how he treated the black people in Princeton, how he treated them like they were ordinary people. So for me, when I was reading that, I think there was still a level of reverence for him, like his genius, and they were fascinated with him. Like, there were so many occurrences where the black people were watching him, but they paid him dignity and respect, you know, just as a person. And I guess Einstein reciprocated that same respect for black people. And I think that may have caused a little bit of confusion, because on page 37, they said, like, there was no racism about him, and he was more race conscious than the white people of Princeton. And they repeatedly said that there couldn't be a racist bone in his body, because he was pretty much a survivor of the Jewish Holocaust, or the persecution, and therefore because he had faced that level of discrimination and threats against his life, that he could have the same compassion and empathy for what Black people in the United States were going through. A common connection that I saw between, I guess probably throughout the book, is how Black people must address white people and how white people must address Black people, or how white people do address Black people. So on page 27, they were talking about the Black university workers. They could have, relationships with the students, but it was the Black people had to still maintain the respect even for white students who were much younger than them. They had to address the students by Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, but the students would call them by their first names. And then in chapter 4, when we're looking at Einstein's domestic worker, there was mention by her granddaughter, well, Grandma, how did Einstein address you? How did you address him? And of course, she had to call him, Mr. Einstein, out of respect or maybe out of conditioning. And he probably referred to her as her first name. And then later on, this was a very interesting and a strange recollection. Let's see. It was Violet Hines. It was mentioned that from her brother that his sister and Einstein would walk and hold hands. She said at her funeral that Violet was a, quote, let's just say, buddy of Albert Einstein. And I guess her daughter, I think it was, asked her mom, well, how did Einstein refer to you? And at first, Einstein was addressing the Black woman as Mrs. Hines or Miss Hines. And then when their relationship became close or of a great friendship, he began calling her Violet. To me, that sounded like maybe Einstein and other white people in this book, they were being friendly towards Black people because they maybe had a sexual attraction to them. I could be incorrect, but I think at this time, Einstein's wife passed away in 36. He came to the United States in 33. His wife passed away in 36. So maybe he was interested in looking at some of the negresses on the plantation. And with that, I will mute my line.
Well, there certainly has been a lot of that throughout the centuries. Let's see. Other folks who we have missed totally. If you have a thought to share, proceed. We'll give folks a second, see if they need any time to get it together. I'll share. Oh, is that somebody or no? Okay, assume there. We'll check in a second. Let's see. I'll go over a few of the notes that I took and then check in one more time, see if any folks have any other comments to share. Let's see. Make sure I read. Mr. Scotty Reed wrote in as well. I'll get his note that he wrote in on our first segment also. Let's see. I've not seen the movie IQ, 1994, one of those biopic picks featuring Walter Matthau as Albert Einstein. I've not seen it. I thought that was a cute little anecdote that they started with, where Shirley Satterfield said she thought she was going to get in. She's telling him, oh, I knew Einstein. I lived right here and blah, blah, blah. Nope. No black people in the film except a black waitress. Just here to help. Let's see. So they go and they start talking to some of these folks who knew him. And I was kind of struck as well by the reverence. And I guess there would be some reverence anyway, just because this is, a white genius. But it seemed something other than that, or something in addition to that. It seemed very typical of the way many times black people will talk about a white person who has been friendly, not called them a nigger, not been explicitly racist, maybe been, courteous at some level to them. It's very, very common. I've heard admitted racist Timothy Wise described this way. Just a number of white people where, he didn't call me a nigger, she didn't spit on us. She didn't call us a spear chucker, and wow, said hello to me, looked me in my face, like the greatest person ever. Like, I think that just shows the type of mistreatment that we are accustomed to receiving from white people, and the power of white people in this system. Like, just having a white person to be nice to you can come to mean so much. Frantz Fanon talked about that, being humanized or being confirmed that you are a human being just by a white person being nice to you. Might even be thought of as white validation. Let's see. This is a pretty famous white person, though, so I guess if you are going to be validated by a white person, get the most famous white person, most powerful white person you can. Let's see. Great observations, I thought, from Lena Sawyer, and the listeners who thought she was one of the least confused folks presented. Let's see. Where she talks about she's the only one who interrogates all of this. Einstein was just the greatest fella, ever. Like, he did all these wonderful things. We did get the one anecdote from Mary Trotman where he helped pay for an African-American young man to go to Princeton, allegedly. That means anything. White people have more resources. But Lena Sawyer, where she's the only one who kind of interrogates this. He's such a great fella and did all these wonderful things. And said, well, really? And she asked, because I would not have thought to ask that question. And again, sometimes you get a lot of insight by asking questions. Or maybe even just asking one great question. I would not have thought to ask, did you all eat together? I just wouldn't have thought the significance, but I thought that was great because she, not only does she share, that was the question that I asked, she gives context. This is why I asked, and it even reminded me of The Help for some odd reason, but it is kind of similar, right? The scene where Octavia Spencer, and I think she might have won an Academy Award for that role, but she is going into the white woman's house, new job. She makes fried chicken or whatever else, and she goes to sit off in the kitchen Negro quarters. And the white woman's like, oh, no, we can sit together. And the black female kind of insists, like, oh, wait a minute, no, you're not supposed to eat. And the white's like, oh, no, going to eat with the Negro, not going to eat by myself. But that, if I'm at least going to pretend that I'm a white person that's not racist, like, what in the world? We cannot have a colored seating section in the house. But thought it was spectacular for her to ask that question. And she says, for me at age 22, this was a sign of someone being on equal relations and thus good, in quotes. And I love that because Mr. Fuller even says you can't even be qualified for good. Nobody in a system of white supremacy. Like, that is folly to even think that way. I love she has it in quotes. I had a hard time reconciling that he could be good and still have her sit in the kitchen and eat. Anyway, I remember she laughed and said, of course she ate in the kitchen when he had people over. She was, after all, his help. The movie. I do not remember her saying why exactly she characterized him as a good man, which is also like, what exactly did he do? Did he help get you a scholarship? Did he give you extra bonuses? Did you get extra days off from work? Like, something. Did you get some lessons? Like, help you compensate for the terrible education that you got in the system of white supremacy? Like, something. Other than just, you all got to walk around and he didn't call you Negro. Told you some good stories about Polite Paul. Remember him last week? That was one of my favorite portions from last week. Polite Paul and the other fella. Jigger. That was it. Jigger, who had the barrel of peanuts, sometimes apples. Let's see. Yeah, and this whole he experienced hardships. That's, I've heard that a lot. Same type of thing with poor white people. Like, they didn't grow up with all that privilege. He knows what it's like to be Negro. Let's see. Was he sexually interested in her? I guess that's another one to think of, courtesy of Miss C. And I thought that was a great comparison about Miss Overton and her going there, and again the same type of thing. I'm not super grateful. Like, white people have taken everything, so of course they have all kinds of materials and resources that they can throw away, give away, donate, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not going to go and feel, oh, thank you, Miss Overton, you're the greatest white woman in the history of the world. Just, for the way that she's treated her grandmother, and then she even includes the details, like all of your pilfering allows you to have this wonderful lifestyle where you can go and play tennis and exclude black people like the Williams sisters or Arthur Ashe or anybody else, and be fit and trim and in shape while you've got my grandmother here keeping your house tidy and spiffy so you don't have to invest your time in all that. Beautiful logic. Least confused person in the book so far, I think. Let's see. The garbage person, again, like a white person. Albert Hines, he talks about his brother had a garbage company, and Albert Einstein would invite him in to talk. Again, just having a white person who is nice, doesn't call you names, might even be courteous. That does not mean that they are not racist. Donald Sterling is reported to have given tens of thousands of dollars to black people before that audio clip came out. So many racists can be nice when they want to. Let's see. Just make sure I don't miss anything. Let's see. Yeah, just lots of that. I mean, that's great and all if he walked and chatted with niggers, but a lot of white people have walked and chatted it up with niggers. We even read that in The Half Has Never Been Told, Edward Baptist, where he talked about how some of the white plantation owners loved to go in the stables to rape the slaves, one, but they also loved to go there to hear the Negro spirituals and hymns and music and like to dance with them during the Christmas holiday and such. So that's not really that exceptional in terms of white culture, racist culture. Let's see. We have a white person who trusts a black person with a combination to a safe. Seen that type of thing before. It's probably happened on the plantation before many times. The whole anecdote about Marian Anderson, I think there are a number, I've heard a number of different reports about her being excluded from different areas. I felt like we just had talked about U.S. expatriates, folks who flee the U.S. and try to go to Canada or any place, Europe, anywhere, Asia, to flee racism, white supremacy. There is nowhere to escape. And this happens over and over. You have white people in the 30s who leave, or even before, Josephine Baker, Marian Anderson, other folks. And then this happens again, James Baldwin, other folks later on who do the same thing. Got to get out of here, racism in the U.S. And, oh man, global system. But Albert Einstein allowing her to stay with him, that's great and all. Again, system of white supremacy. White people have lots and lots and lots of resources. The most we can do is the least we can do. Beryl Winfrey. Let's see. That's it. I'm just going to, this is Alice Satterfield, where she's kind of talking about some of her experience. She says, we didn't talk a lot. On a couple of occasions, he held my hand without saying anything. He would just walk in the silent and wonderful way in which you knew everything would be all right. You felt good walking with him. He did not look down on people. He was inspirational. That is interesting. You don't find too many white people doing the hand touching thing. Just, I would say, a male and a female, period. Hand holding is, Anywho, I did also think it was important, Miss Satterfield in her own right, where they go on to say when she was younger, she decided to sit in the whites-only section of Princeton's movie house. And just pausing there, because, man, we've had our book club for a while. I cannot even recall how many times we have read a book where something about movie theater racism has popped up. That was all over The Warmth of Other Suns. That was in Richard Williams' Black and White, The Way I See It. That's Serena and Venus's dad. It's been in a number. I know it was in Melba Pattillo Beals, The Little Rock Nine. It's been in a number of the books that we've read. Dr. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, about black people being mistreated and or relegated to the balcony and the worst possible seats when it's time to go to the movie theater if they're allowed to attend at all. But here it comes again. Black people at the movie theater. Let's see. There was a definite class structure. Oh, I thought that was another great anecdote about keeping to make sure that they kept the buses separate. She says the institute wasn't all that integrated. There was a definite class structure, racist structure. Clearly, they didn't want people to mingle with the help. I'm so glad I mentioned that movie today. Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer would have a big party every year. I remember one professor got reprimanded for dancing with me. Pause again. White people cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. They will get in trouble with other white people. Ended on reprimanded. He said to me, I don't understand why I cannot dance with you. I bet he will. I don't recall Einstein going to these parties. That's the same suggestion I give. Don't attend these parties. And that might be another cowbell there. It's party time now. We can get physical with the niggers, but not too physical. Get in trouble with the white people. Let's see. I posted a clip to the movie Light to the Power of Two, so you can check that out. I don't know if they have the entire movie available. It probably is. I didn't really look that hard, but I did. It's like 5 minutes, so if you want to see a little clip of it, check it out. Feel free. Let's see. He goes to class, all is well. I still would have rather had like accurate information as opposed to them making up some story, alleging that this happened and what have you, when they have actual real people, Paul Robeson, that they could have included and dramatized all of that. Let's see. The remedial classes, I thought that was, it could have been today. Other unforeseen issues arose when the African-American Witherspoon Street community, as a result of the old Princeton plan. Now, if you have a Princeton plan, that seems like this is well organized and thought out. This is not white ignorance. This seems like white people have a plan that they have been executing for decades and refining, because they still got it rolling well. In 2000, they just refine and they add Ritalin, different medications and drugs along the way, make it a little better, make it work more smooth. Let's see. Chapter 5, Einstein and Robeson. We talked about the brutality of the football team. Definitely get away from all that stuff. I thought it was just the description, a tall, tapering Negro. What is that, tall, dark, and handsome? I'm not sure. Let's see. Anything else? I'll check, because we talked about a lot of this when we read the biography on Robeson. I do think, I guess this will be my last comment. I am glad that we read that biography, because I would have probably thought nothing of them mentioning Emperor Jones, which is really lame and racist. This is the movie where Paul Robeson's character ends up going to jail for slashing another colored fellow with a razor. Isn't that spectacular? But yeah, I don't think there's anything to, jump up and down about Emperor Jones. We talked about that back then. I think if you watched it now, you probably have a lot of side eyes about anybody saying, oh, this is a great work, another great feature with black cast. And they don't really comment on that. This book wasn't published that long ago. I think if you were writing an analysis of this in 2005, I think it should be pointed out as racist. Paul Robeson was great, but this is trash. White co-author, I think we talked about that last time. Yeah, there's lots more cowbells, Othello. We talked about a lot of that when you can go in the archives. It's not even that far back. Robeson, activist, actor and activist, I think, is it? Dr. Gerald Horne, his biography on Paul Robeson. Let's see. Our narrator, Mel, hanging out with us. Excellent job 2 weeks in a row. Thank you so much.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a few notes. I just want to piggyback off of I thought Tall Tapering Negro was an interesting tall tapering was a very interesting description of Robeson, too. And at the bottom of page 55, it says, Einstein, still energetic at 52, shook his hand. And I just thought, one, this sentence feels unnecessary, and two, it had to have been crafted to contrast with the athleticism of Robeson, which is described in the sentence and the whole paragraph prior and the sentence after. That's an interesting sentence to throw in there, but it is. But then I have ideas about the whole editing of the book in general. I do appreciate, though, the update on the information about why they added all the war information from the first reading, because I actually haven't finished the presentation by the authors yet. I think it is good context, even if it's a little bit lengthy, and I'll just try to keep in mind that just because I've heard a lot of sordid tales about how these fancy universities start doesn't mean that a lot of the readers who come across the book will have. Although I so want to know what the black author wrote and what the white author wrote, because the black author, I think, stated that he was a librarian, whereas the white author, I think, had previously written another book about Einstein, and that's just interesting to me. There was a section where I believe the British director said that with regards to playing the stage play elsewhere, one of the plays that Einstein was in, they were quote unquote afraid of issues the production will raise. To me, that just equals out to will not enforce a mob, riot, or homicide law against a white racist or a racist race soldier. Just state things the way they are. There's no nice way to say, I think someone will inevitably be lynched because of my production, but it's just being honest about what we're talking about and the time period we're in this book. So in another section, I didn't hear many descriptions of his interactions with non-famous adult black males. Outside of, I think, the black male who said that he always spoke to people when he took out their trash. And I heard that he was holding all the females' hands and the children's hands and giving them nickels, but I really want to hear about how he interacted with non-famous adult black males more. And in Chapter 4 as a whole, I'll say that I don't know the motives for his actions. That's the sense that I was getting during the reading. Like, is he just getting exercise? Is he being nosy? Does he really need to sit down on a porch? I mean, I want to see signs that a person who is considered a Nobel Prize physicist understands logic, and that the information that he's hearing from these black people is requiring of him an appropriate response as a logical physicist who's considered a genius. Because then in Chapter 5, I'm hearing, and we're not finished with it yet, but I'm hearing that he's advocating against fascism. But I wanted to hear, for instance, if he ever sought justice for anyone locally or anyone non-famous locally or non-famous at all. Although there was the Scottsboro, I think, boys and things like that, I think sometimes it can be a good influence to it can be a good technique to exercise your influence abroad or at a safe distance, but I'm looking forward to hearing at times when he advocated locally for those that he lived and walked around, like maybe against a white person locally, because the only person I'm hearing about trying to counter racism locally probably is Robeson, and then the little girl who sat in the movie theater and went to the white bakery where black people weren't allowed, the bulk bakery. And in all of those anecdotes throughout Chapter 4, I just don't hear anyone saying Einstein forced the integration of the theater. He did this and that for, the black workers at the college. Like, I'm not really hearing. I guess it's humanizing him, Chapter 4, but I just wish I'd heard more about his activism to prove that he's quote-unquote not a racist or nothing racist about him. Also, after hearing about the possibility of his relationship with Violet Hines, now people say all kinds of stuff at funerals, so I don't know, but I started looking at the Marianne Anderson incident differently, but maybe that's just me, like him letting her stay at his house up until his death. Or until, she left and she knew he was going to pass away. I'm also going to watch that movie, like To the Power of Two, now that you have linked it. And lastly, there was a section where Robeson says, it means so little when a man like me wins some success. And he talks about how he has cousins who cannot read, who haven't been given the opportunity that he has, and that's the only difference between them. And I think that this thinking is antithetical on a large scale to white supremacy. It's just very much not congruent. It's not going to go along well with white supremacy. That sort of help those who need the most thinking. At least that's how I think of it. And now I really want to go back and listen to the Robeson book study sessions because I don't think I can do 296 performances of a play night after night on Broadway in New York, and that shows some kind of discipline. So Rosen overall just seems like a very fascinating character I want to learn more about. And that was all of my notes for this part that we've read.
He is a very fascinating character. I thoroughly enjoyed reading. Oh, and I messed up the title of the book. People will be all confused trying to find it. It's Revolutionary. It's Paul Robeson, the artist as revolutionary. There we go. I don't know what silliness I was saying before. The Artist as Revolutionary, Paul Robeson by Gerald Horne, published in 2016. He'll be on the program Tuesday, so we'll probably get a word or three in about this book since we spent all that time reading it. But yeah, he's a fascinating fella and victim of white supremacy. And it's a reason, he didn't perish that long ago, right? Like we know lots more about people who died a lot longer, who died longer ago than Mr. Robeson, and it's deliberate. He was a victim of COINTELPRO, and they have done a successful job kind of boulderizing his legacy, so that we know very little about him, relationship to Albert Einstein or anything else that he was doing. I guess making sure, Mel, are you saying maybe there's Area 8 sexual interest with him saying, hey, Marian Anderson, those rascals won't let you stay there. Come stay at my house. Are you saying there might be something where all of this courtesy with black females and hand-holding, there might be some sexual interest, and then wanting to see how he's treating black males, just making sure I understood correctly?
Yes. I have suspicions, and I want them to be proven wrong. So I hope that information is revealed as we keep going.
Right on. That I am sure there are folks who listen to the cows that scoundrel Gus just has people's minds in the gutter and talking about sexual intercourse. It's all he's done for 11 years. Is talk about sexual intercourse between white people and black people. That is a central part of racism, white supremacy. Gunnar Myrdal concluded that as well, white man suspected racist. But I would say just the human element of it all. I thought it was great. I think Miss C pointed out, his wife was kind of sickly, and oh man, hey, human element. People do have sexual drive, they call it, sexual interest, they call it. Married fella, sexual interest. I mean, that's biology, right? He was a physicist, but I mean, that is another field of science, unless I'm misinformed. So, yeah, why would we think he would not have sexual interest? And then if you have these lowly black people that you're around all the time, and they look up to you, oh my gosh, Einstein. Oh, I mean, system of racism, white supremacy, human element. Just something to think about as maybe we'll all be wrong. No need to suspect that. Everything was what they call it on the up and up, platonic. Anybody else have comments they need to make sure they get in? Make sure I get in as well. The segment where they were talking about Othello, which we discussed a lot in the biography on Paul Robeson, and even his physical stature. I remember there are a whole lot of those curious type phrases. They talked about the way that they would describe him, and it would generally be in that kind of sexualized, tall, protruding Negro. Like, it would be like, what is? Yeah. Anyway, the section on bottom of 58. This is Satterfield speaking again. She says, Princeton was still Princeton. A black man whose mother worked in several of the homes in the university reported that when Othello came to town, his mother overheard at parties much discussion about the fact that in MacArthur Theater, Paul Robeson kissed a white woman. It was a play, but they could not accept that, and they showed their Southern upbringing and their Southern attitudes. I'm just pausing right there. This is, again, Miss Satterfield. Did I get the quote correct? Oh, this was not Miss Satterfield. This is a different speaker. Sorry, no, incorrect attributions. This is not Miss Satterfield. Different victim speaking. But either way, Southern, these are not Southern attributes. This is just what it means to be racist white supremacist. So you could travel to the other side of the world, We could go to Nazi Germany and they would be saying the same thing about, the Rhineland bastards. That's the term that they used. We got all these little dark babies that these nigger soldiers have left here, and what a disgrace, and they have raped the German land, and we need, all of that. Is that Southern attributes? What are you talking about? It's the system of racism, white supremacy, what it means to be white. And yeah, we still have a problem with that. Even 2020, a lot of that, this is localized to the South or specific areas as opposed to the known universe. What it means to be white. This is how they function. This is another reminder as well, because they said that it was reported that you would overhear this conversation amongst whites all over town. Oh my gosh, that Negro kissed a white woman. Did you see the play? Again, white people are not ignorant about racism. If they're talking about this and how this is incorrect, this shouldn't be happening, they know what the rules are for the system. They're not ignorant. Yeah, I guess I'm good. Folks, anything else they need to get in? Second audio segment. I assume folks are satisfied. I don't think I missed anything. Sorry. All right, we'll try it again. Folks, we missed totally. If you have commentary.
Greetings to everyone. Greetings, Gus.
Greetings.
Yes, I was just waiting for you to bring me in. But I'm going to follow in line with most of the commentary. The first thing I heard, because I got in kind of a little bit late, I heard the name Oppenheimer. Now, I don't know if they're talking about the principles, science behind the atomic bomb, but Oppenheimer. But if it is, I'm sure that this guy had a relationship with him. It is reportedly understood that he did not have any connection with the Manhattan Project, but he certainly, I think, had a relationship with most of those fellow physicists. And when you see that number of people, and they were using his code to make this bomb, that he had an understanding that it was being attempted in this part of the world. But anyway, back to what everybody else was basically stating. By him being quote unquote discriminated against in Europe, he was able to do the math, so to speak, and get the hell out of there. Just as he was about to get burned along with the books, and came to an environment where he was accepted by white people as being a white person. So I can see a Albert Einstein being very nice to black people, but as what everybody's been saying is that does not take him off the suspect list of practicing racism. You really haven't done anything. This guy is supposed to, it's being bragged about him on how high his IQ is. Okay, well, with that IQ, why didn't you develop some sort of system as a white person to wage war against other white people who are practicing racism? You know, I mean, in other words, he didn't use his IQ to solve the problem, so to speak. I think I heard something else about the schooling that Paul Robeson went through. It was most of the instructors, if I'm not mistaken, were non-white black people, and it excelled. And in turn, he was one of the successful products of that type of environment. Is that true? There was a segment where that was talked about.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah. There have been some matching understanding from my background. Not that I was one of the products of like a Paul Robeson, certainly not. But two of the three schooling levels that I was involved in, elementary and middle school, was similar in the place that's called Richmond Heights, where I grew up at. And now the institutions are still in the same locations, but now a black child who stays right across the street from those institutions cannot go there. The only chance that they have to go to either one of those two institutions, the elementary school, Frank Crawford Martin Elementary, and Richmond Heights Junior High, they would have to apply for it. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. They would have to apply for it. So I'm kind of like juxtaposing that in the show that, similarities in the practice of racism, white supremacy in a more refined way. And that's about it from what I've understood and learned from the first reading, the parts that I was able to tune into. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Is there any other folks we missed totally?
Can I be heard?
Thomas in New York, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Man, this book is it's driving slower than Miss Daisy does. Moving slow. I'm not getting a lot of what I was thinking it was going to be about. I find that white people do that a lot, where they go to the black area, hang out with the Negroes, and I don't know what they get out of it. I personally think that Mr. Einstein was a pedophile. Because it's all these little girls he's talking to and stuff like that. Like, you keep going to the black area and walking off with little girls and holding their hands and buying them things. So if you look at him, he looks like a pedophile. Last night I was on a show and interviewed a guy by the name of Lee Oscar, a white musician from a group called War. And he reminds me of Einstein, funny hairdo, Afro-like hairdo, hanging out with the black folk. No one suspected him of being racist. Just very much like Einstein. And considered a genius, all in the same breath. But what I don't get about the book is the add-ons to Mr. Robeson. I don't really catch the connection on how that's showing that Einstein was not a racist, white supremacist. Especially, I think it would be illogical for Albert Einstein to come to America thinking about helping some Negroes. I mean, I'm sure the situation he was escaping let him know that he better follow the line when he gets here. So I just don't think that would have been something he did. He went around the black people for a reason. I can't figure out why. Former President Bill Clinton, every time he was in a scandal, he'd end up in a black church. I think he was soaking up that energy. I don't know what Einstein's reason is. The only thing I could think is he was a pedophile. Because if he wanted sex with an adult black woman, he's Albert Einstein. You know what I'm saying? You don't got to do too much, and that's all. Thank you.
Reputation and shatters. I guess we'll continue to pay attention and see if, what other, because I think we haven't really got to the section where they talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. So folks were saying, let's see some of his relationship with black males. And I think it was specifically not famous, so I guess that wouldn't count because it was not famous, just kind of regular black males. Let's see if that happens. So we'll continue to be alert. Anybody else? Any other comments, questions they need to get in before we get to return to the rest of Chapter 5? Anything else? assume folks are good for the time being. So we're in Chapter 5 on page 60. Double check. Yep. Chapter 5, page 60. If you have additional comments that you did not get to share, just make a note. We should have ample time once the second audio segment concludes. Context of White Supremacy, Rodger Taylor, Fred Jerome, Einstein on Race and Racism, audio segment number 2.
April 26, 1937, was market day in the small Basque town of Guernica, where some 10,000 peasants and others from the surrounding region crowded into and around the central plaza. In mid-afternoon, a squadron of Heinkel German airplanes suddenly appeared overhead, and at 4:40 p.m. they began bombing the town. The bombing continued for 3 hours, slaughtering women carrying their babies, shop owners protecting their goods, and peasants running for cover in the fields. When the dust had settled, more than 1,600 people were dead and 800 others wounded. The Germans would later claim it was a military strike aimed at the town's single munitions plant. But, in fact, just about the only parts of Guernica not touched by destruction were the munitions factory and the bridge. Some 35,000 volunteers from 52 countries traveled to Spain to help resist the fascist assault. The international volunteers included some 2,800 American men in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. The Lincolns came from all walks of life, all regions of the country, and included seamen, students, the unemployed, miners, fur workers, lumberjacks, teachers, salesmen, athletes, dancers, and artists. They established the first racially integrated military unit in U.S. history, and were the first to be led by a black commander, Oliver Law, a 33-year-old Army veteran from Chicago. Under the banner of neutrality, the Roosevelt administration had banned travel to Spain, but the Lincolns managed to get there anyway, most crossing the Pyrenees from France on foot with the help of French anti-fascists. Nearly 750 Lincolns were killed in battle, with hundreds more wounded. Few 20th century conflicts polarized right and left as sharply and publicly as the Spanish Civil War. Conservative groups consistently supported Franco, even after World War II. In 1945, for example, Mississippi's Congressman John Rankin attacked Einstein for endorsing the American Committee for Spanish Freedom. Rankin wants FBI to curb Einstein, declared a Detroit News headline. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, before, during, and after the Second World War, condemned Einstein as an endorser of the North American Committee to Aid Spanish Democracy and a sponsor of its medical bureau, which the HUAC and Hoover called Communist Fronts. Others, who continued for years to hail Franco and red-bait his opponents, included the officials of the Roman Catholic Church and the American Legion, which gave its 1951 Award of Merit to Generalissimo Francisco Franco. Volunteer armies rarely, if ever, organized themselves, and in the case of Spain, it was no secret that the international brigades were organized by communist parties around the world. But support for the beleaguered Spanish Republic extended far beyond the left, involving liberals, democratic socialists, even anti-communists. In England, Clement Attlee, head of the British Labour Party and future Prime Minister, endorsed the anti-Franco campaign, and an ocean of ordinary people who never wore a political label. Defending Spanish democracy became an international rallying cry in dozens of languages and the theme of books, poems, songs, and even Hollywood movies. A broad array of artists, scientists, and activists joined the cause, including Americans such as Ernest Hemingway, Langston Hughes, Helen Keller, Gene Kelly, Gypsy Rose Lee, Dorothy Parker, and A. Philip Randolph, as well as Einstein and Robeson. A number of African American intellectuals and artists adopted the Spanish cause as their own. Black newspapers, including the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American, the Atlanta Daily World, and the Chicago Defender, unequivocally sided with the Spanish Republic and occasionally featured articles about black participants in the Lincoln Brigade. Several black medical personnel from the United Aid for Ethiopia, UAE, offered medical supplies and raised money in the community. Harlem churches and professional organizations sponsored rallies in behalf of the Spanish Republic. Black relief workers and doctors raised enough money to purchase a fully equipped ambulance for use in Spain. And some of Harlem's greatest musicians, including Cab Calloway, Fats Waller, Count Basie, W.C. Handy, Jimmy Lunsford, Noble Sisley, and U.B. Blake, gave benefit concerts sponsored by Harlem's Musicians Committee for Spanish Democracy and the Spanish Children's Milk Fund. Robeson and his wife Eslanda went to Spain during the last week of January 1938. For months, Robeson had been singing and speaking at concerts and mass meetings in London, where the family was living at the time, to rally support and raise money for the Spanish Republic. At one meeting in the Albert Hall in December, Robeson told the overflow crowd, "The artist must take sides. We must elect to fight for freedom or slavery. I have made my choice." In words that Einstein might have echoed, Robeson said that scientists, too, had to choose. Every artist, every scientist must decide now where he stands. Through the destruction in certain countries of the greatest of man's literary heritages, through the propagation of false ideas of racial and national superiority, the artist, the scientist, the writer is challenged. The battlefront is everywhere. A month later, he and Essie were in Barcelona. Robeson's first interview in Spain was with Afro-Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen, who asked why he had decided to come to the war-torn country. "It is not only as an artist that I love the cause of democracy in Spain," he told Guillen, "but also as a black man. I belong to an oppressed race, discriminated against, one that could not live if fascism triumphed in the world. My father was a slave, and I do not want my children to become slaves." For a week, the Robesons traveled across what was left of Republican Spain. They witnessed the devastation from fascist bombings of civilian neighborhoods, schools, and hospitals, and Robeson chatted with Spanish loyalist soldiers and anti-fascist volunteers from around the world, including a group of black Lincoln Brigade members from the United States. But by far the high point of the week was Robeson's concert for the troops. He sang, in English and Spanish, new anti-Franco songs such as Los Cuatro Generales, the Four Insurgent Generals, as well as old favorites like Old Man River, with new words Robeson had recently added. Instead of the original, Tired of Livin' but Scared of Dyin', he sang to a deluge of cheers, I must keep fighting until I'm dying. Describing Robeson's impact on the troops, British volunteers later recalled that at first most of the men didn't believe the rumor he was really in Spain. You don't get people like that every day of the week running into a war to see how things are going. When they met him, when they heard him sing, the whole place lit up. It was just like a magnet drawing you, as if somebody was reaching out to grasp you and draw you in. They felt they had been with a friend of lifelong standing. Robeson called the trip to Spain a major turning point in his life. I have never met such courage in a people, he later told a reporter. At the same time, by 1938, the outlook for the Republic was grim, and if Robeson didn't feel the impending defeat, what he had seen was not encouraging. He attacked the failure of the United States, England, and France to support the Republic. In his notebook, he wrote, "We are certainly not doing anywhere near enough. We don't feel deeply enough." Einstein expressed his anger at America's neutrality toward the fascist attack on Spain early in February 1937, declaring he felt ashamed that the democratic nations had failed to support the loyalist government of Spain. In a message to a prominent Spanish personality, whose identity was not revealed, according to a New York Times report, Einstein said, "I assure you how intimately united I feel with the loyal forces and with their heroic struggle in this great crisis of your country." Perhaps because it criticized a U.S. government policy, It was a statement that Hoover's FBI was fond of repeating in Einstein's dossier as evidence of the scientist's subversive character. 2 months later, Einstein sent a message to a New York mass meeting, also addressed by the writer Thomas Mann, explaining that poor health kept him from attending in person. I view vigorous action to save freedom in Spain as the inescapable duty of all true Democrats. Such a duty would also exist even if the Spanish government and the Spanish people had not given such admirable proof of their courage and heroism. The loss of political freedom in Spain would seriously endanger political freedom in France, the birthplace of human rights. May you succeed in rousing the public. Einstein also supported the Canadians who fought against Franco, sponsoring the Friends of the Mackenzie Papineau Battalion Rehabilitation Fund, which gave assistance to Canadians wounded in Spain. In a last-ditch effort to stop the fascist takeover, Einstein and a group of Princeton University professors issued a futile appeal to Roosevelt in the spring of 1938 to lift the U.S. embargo on sending weapons to the Spanish Republican government. In March 1939, Madrid fell to the fascists. Nearly 20 years later, the great Spanish cellist Pablo Casals said that he was perpetually grateful to Einstein for his protest against the injustice to which my homeland was sacrificed. In a tribute after the scientist's death, Casals described Einstein as a pillar of the human conscience in a time when so many civilized values seemed to be tottering. Chapter 6, Wall of Fame. By August 1942, when Einstein and Robeson met after Othello, events had fulfilled the prediction that Spain would be a prelude to a wider war. Their conversation that evening may have touched on Shakespeare, but it's hard to believe they didn't talk at some length about the war news. It was gloomy. Einstein's warning 5 years earlier that the fall of Spain would seriously endanger political freedom in France proved to be just the beginning. The Nazis had taken not just Paris, but most of Europe, and the Wehrmacht Blitzkrieg was sweeping across the Soviet Union, seemingly unstoppable. Recent reports had described the beginning of a possibly important battle for the Russian industrial city of Stalingrad, but the Nazis were predicting victory within a few weeks. Both Einstein and Robeson felt that stopping Hitler's war machine meant backing the Russian front-line resistance and strengthening the alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union. For Einstein, that alliance was also the first step toward world government, the only way to permanent peace. For Robeson, who had visited Russia, Soviet society and its planned socialist economy seemed free of racism and represented the future. For both men, supporting the war effort had become the primary political goal. The Good War, as Studs Terkel would later call it, was the last time, perhaps the only time, so many Americans united behind their government. For a sense of how popular the Soviet-American anti-Nazi alliance was, consider that a few weeks before seeing Einstein at MacArthur Theater, Robeson had taken part in a rally at New York's Madison Square Garden, urging America to send war relief supplies to the Russians. Other speakers at the rally included New York's Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, American Federation of Labor President William Green, Einstein's friend Rabbi Stephen Wise, opera singer Jan Pierce, pianist Arthur Rubinstein, and Supreme Court Justice Stanley Reed. But J. Edgar Hoover and others on the far right were not impressed. Well before their 1942 Othello meeting, Einstein and Robeson shared another distinction, although they probably did not know it. They had become targets of Hoover and the FBI. While the war had made Washington and Moscow allies against the Axis fascist powers, Hoover and his congressional cohorts on HUAC seemed at least as focused on beating the Russians as the Nazis. Many of the isolationists who had opposed entering the war before the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 still felt America was fighting the wrong war with the wrong ally, the Soviet Union. Before the war, Hoover had maintained a number of friendly ties with Hitler's police officials. Among other examples, he sent Hitler's Gestapo chief, Heinrich Himmler, a personal invitation to attend the 1937 World Police Conference in Montreal. The following year, he welcomed one of Himmler's top aides to the United States, and we now know that after the war, he embraced former Nazis into his red-hunting FBI apparatus. Until Pearl Harbor, the FBI chief also held secret talks with congressional isolationists whose campaigns received covert contributions from the German government and who did their utmost to keep the United States out of the anti-fascist war. But from 1941 to 1945, while billboards and posters across the country urged all out for the war effort and pictured determined-looking Americans, sleeves rolled up, giving blood, joining the army, and working in hospitals or defense plants, Hoover was more discreet about his politics. Behind the scenes, the FBI and HUAC conducted low-profile mini-witch hunts. They investigated, spied upon, and held hearings on people and groups, especially left-wing union activists, teachers, and writers, they believed to be exerting communist influence in America. During his 46-year reign as head of the FBI, Hoover was often described as all-powerful. Yet, for all of Hoover's power, he could not have carried out his policies without the tacit and often explicit approval of higher officials. As one leading Hoover biographer points out, Hoover's authority depended on powerful national leaders who shared the FBI director's obsessive anti-communism and yet sought to mask their own complicity and indifference to the law. FBI ears were apparently not present backstage at the McCarter when Einstein and Robeson met, but Hoover and his bureau, as well as the HUAC, had already targeted both men. The FBI had begun intercepting Robeson's calls and letters. It would begin similar Einstein bugging within a few years. But Hoover's attack on Einstein went beyond tapping phones and opening mail. In 1940, in an action that remained secret for nearly half a century, the FBI fed the U.S. Army a series of anti-Einstein memos. Quote, "Unlikely that a man of his background could become a loyal American citizen," unquote, and, based largely on those memos, Army intelligence denied Einstein security clearance, barring him from work on the Manhattan Project that built the atomic bomb. Despite America's wartime anti-Nazi alliance with the Soviets, Hoover's G-men prepared an extensive list of those they considered red or pink. As Othello finally opened on Broadway in the fall of 1943, the FBI chief placed Robeson's name on his DETCOM roster, those to be put into concentration camps in the event of war with the Soviets. Ironically, during the war years, even as Hoover added both men to his lengthening list of enemies, Einstein and Robeson supported Washington's policies more vigorously than at any other time in their lives. In 1939, after Hitler's annexation of Austria and seizure of Czechoslovakia, and a Nazi world conquest on the way to becoming reality, Einstein put aside his past differences with Roosevelt. The house was burning, and the American president seemed to have the only fire truck in town. Einstein was on vacation at Peconic, Long Island on July 15, 1939, when Leo Szilard and fellow Hungarian Jewish refugee physicist Eugene Wigner drove out from New York to tell him the Nazis might be building an atomic bomb. After discussing steps they might take, Einstein agreed to send his now famous letter to Roosevelt. He and Szilard actually wrote it together, but decided that only Einstein should sign it, urging the president to prepare for a U.S. atom bomb program. 8 months earlier, Hitler's SS had unleashed a ruthless pogrom against Germany's remaining Jews, assaulting, raping, and killing them, nearly 100 murdered in one night, and arresting some 40,000 for shipment to concentration camps. The Nazis smashed so many Jewish-owned stores and synagogues that the streets were covered with broken glass. One news report described Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, as a wave of destruction, looting, and incendiarism, unparalleled in Germany since the 30 Years' War. Police confined themselves to regulating traffic and making wholesale arrests of Jews for their own protection. Building an atomic bomb was not Einstein's favorite project, but he agreed with Szilard's argument that if Hitler got the bomb first, he would hold the world hostage. Szilard later wrote that Einstein was very quick to see the implications and perfectly willing to assume responsibility for sounding the alarm. "My dear professor," the president wrote back to Einstein, "I want to thank you for your recent letter. I have found the data of such import that I have convened a board consisting of the head of the Bureau of Standards and a chosen representative of the Army and Navy to thoroughly investigate the possibilities of your suggestion regarding the element of uranium. Large government projects are never so simple, and it would be 2 more years before the Manhattan Project was actually launched. But Einstein had decided to support Roosevelt. America seemed to be the only country with the technology to beat Hitler to the atomic punch." Einstein became an official American on October 1st, 1940. With his stepdaughter, Margot, and secretary, Helen Dukas, he took the oath of citizenship in the federal courthouse at Trenton. As the three raised their hands for the swearing-in, an alert Associated Press photographer raised his camera, despite a no-photos rule in the courtroom. Newspapers around the world printed the resulting picture, worth many 1,000 words in public relations for the U.S. government. As a prelude to becoming a citizen, Einstein had provided more good press for his new country. In a radio interview on the NBC network series I Am an American, sponsored by the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, the citizen-to-be said, "In America, the development of the individual and his creative powers is possible, and that, to me, is the most valuable asset in life." Unquote. And in words he quite possibly questioned a decade later during the McCarthy period, Einstein added, quote, "In some countries, men have neither political rights nor the opportunity for free intellectual development. But for most Americans, such a situation would be intolerable." Unquote. It was his warmest praise yet for the United States. Yet, even at its warmest, Einstein's support for government policies was not unconditional. He concluded his 1940 pre-citizenship radio interview by declaring that, quote, "It is all the more important to see that these liberties are preserved and protected." Unquote. It was a rhetorical technique he used frequently in the next 15 years, praising America's venerated ideals, freedom of speech and thought, equal opportunity and equality before the law, but warning that these principles were in danger, or at least needing vigilant guarding. In a little-known speech at the New York's World's Fair, shortly after he became a citizen, Einstein took a similar approach to race. "The world of tomorrow" was the theme of the World's Fair that opened in the spring of 1939 in New York's Flushing Meadows, before there was a Shea Stadium. With exhibits from 58 nations, 33 U.S. states, and 1,300 private companies, some 2,800 people a day visited the General Motors Futurama exhibit and were treated to a vision of life in 1960, where technology was so efficient that everyone took 2-month vacations and lived in collapsible houses, and drove GM cars cleanly fueled by something called liquid air. On the way out, everyone was given a small GM pin that read, "I have seen the future." If it seemed like a great escape, perhaps that was what made it so popular to hundreds of thousands of depression-weary fairgoers. Yet, even escape has its limits. A visitor to the fair during the first week in September remember seeing television sets, electric washers and dryers, and a refrigerator that made its own ice. And there was a light inside of it. But later, as she walked into the polished pavilion, all the lights suddenly went out. At first she thought it was an electrical failure, and then we heard over a loudspeaker that Germany had just invaded Poland, and they were closing down the pavilion. The war had started. In the fair's second year, a new exhibit opened as part of the American Common, the U.S. exhibition area. The Wall of Fame was singularly lacking in technological gizmos and futuristic electric miracles. It consisted simply of 21 panels inscribed with more than 600 names of immigrants, Negroes, and American Indians, divided into categories of expertise such as government, music, arts, and science, and chosen from more than 6,000 names submitted to the selection committees in the various professions. The music section listed Paul Robeson, and the science section included Albert Einstein. Above the panels in large capitalized words appeared the following inscription, quote, "Inscribed here are the names of American citizens of foreign birth, American Indians, and Negroes, who have made notable contributions to our living, ever-growing democracy, devoted to peace and freedom." Unquote. The exhibit was boldly designed to contrast with the rest of the fair, emphasizing that America's strength came not just from its technology, but from its melting pot tradition, and that, in the words of the then popular Ballad for Americans, the nation is as strong as the people who made it, the et ceteras and the and so forths who do the work. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, Governor Herbert Lehman of New York, and Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia all served on the honorary committee of the American Common, and all could have well seen the need for, and political value of, promoting America's diversity as a magnet for immigrants. And who better to give the inauguration speech for the new exhibit than America's most famous immigrant? But Einstein's speech did not fit into a patriotic scenario. While he acknowledged the fine and high-minded idea behind the Wall of Fame exhibit, he pointed out that America still has a heavy debt to discharge for all the troubles and disabilities it has laid on the Negro's shoulders. Perhaps that's why the speech has never been published in its entirety. It is a fine and high-minded idea, also in the best sense, a proud one, to erect at the World's Fair a wall of fame to immigrants and Negroes of distinction. The significance of the gesture is this. It says, these, too, belong to us, and we are glad and grateful to acknowledge the debt that the community owes, those who are often regarded as stepchildren of the nation. If, then, I am to speak on the occasion, it can only be to say something in behalf of these stepchildren. As for the Negroes, the country still has a heavy debt to discharge for all the troubles and disabilities it has laid on the Negro's shoulders, for all that his fellow citizens have done and to some extent still are doing to him. To the Negro and his wonderful songs and choirs, we are indebted for the finest contribution in the realm of art which America has so far given to the world. And this great gift we owe not to those whose names are engraved on this wall of fame, but to the children of the people, blossoming namelessly as the lilies of the field. In a way, the same is true of the immigrants. They have contributed in their way to the flowering of the community, and their individual striving and suffering have remained unknown. One more thing I would say with regard to immigration generally, there exists a fatal miscomprehension. Unemployment is not decreased by restricting immigration, for unemployment depends on the faulty distribution of work among those capable of work. Immigration increases consumption as much as it does demand on labor. The Wall of Fame arose out of a high-minded ideal. It is calculated to stimulate just and magnanimous thoughts and feelings. May it work to that effect. With reservations, Einstein continued to support Roosevelt, sending congratulations on his re-election in 1940, yet privately at least castigating him for failing to commit America more quickly to the anti-Nazi fight. At one point, as German planes were bombing London during the summer of 1940, Einstein called Roosevelt's abstention disastrous. But, after Pearl Harbor, Einstein cheered America's entry into the war he called a struggle between those who adhere to the principles of slavery and oppression and those who believe in the right of self-determination. In a telephone message to be broadcast to the German people, he said he felt particularly fortunate to be an American. America is today the hope of all honorable men. J. Edgar Hoover did not include these remarks in Einstein's FBI file. Robeson, too, became a Roosevelt backer after the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. Until then, the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939 kept Robeson on the sidelines, following the pro-Moscow line of non-intervention. As soon as Hitler's troops crossed into Soviet territory, violating the pact, the Soviets changed their line, and so did millions of their supporters around the world, including Robeson. In 1942, he linked America's war effort to his lifelong fight for equal rights. Quote, "A victory for Hitler would be the worst thing which could happen to my people. It would mean we would all be consigned to slavery for I don't know how long. Therefore, the salvation of the Negro people lies in the overthrow of fascism." Unquote. On the morning of August 16, 1942, when he arrived in Princeton to do Othello, Robeson told the Princetonian that the racial situation in America has improved, adding, "If the administration permits the Negro to help in the war effort, as he wants to, I don't think there will be any trouble." The "if" in Robeson's forecast turned out to be the key word. While more than 1 million black Americans ultimately served in World War II, the vast majority were consigned to support units. Only 5% saw combat, in all black units usually commanded by white officers. It was something less than an all-out commitment to equality, as well as a clear signal of struggles to come.
Context of White Supremacy. Alrighty. Got through Gus T's era. Cannot believe that. Mixed up the chapters, but got it figured out. Glad we did not get all the way to the end and realized we had gone out of order. So we just finished up chapter 6. We'll start next week with chapter 7. Make sure I get it again. One of our investors emailed and said, "Oh man, they had a delay in getting the book." I guess he maybe ordered it or tried to get it from the library. And he said there was some sort of holdup. I don't know if it's Rona related, right? Because they have said some things have slowed down with, all the zaniness. So I think Henry in Chicago said last week, if you need the PDF, if you want a hard copy of the book to kind of follow along with, that would help in your studies, or if you just want it, for your personal library, I think he said he would be happy to share that there's a link for JSTOR online. So he said he'd be happy to share. No, I got one of our investors who emailed and said he was having a problem. I think I was able to get him linked up with a copy. So let us know. Always looking to help folks do a little reading. Reading is more important than watching television. Number is 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press *61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564543 #. Press *61 if you would like to chime in. All the folks who were with us first time around with a hand up, let's see, our narrator, Mel, B in Toronto, Thomas in New York, retired firefighter, and Henry in Chicago. All should be with us. Other folks, if you have not shared at all and you think you have a question, observation, something to share, go ahead and get your hand up now. Please do not wait until the last moment to chime in. Folks who are with us, if you have commentary, proceed.
Can I be heard again?
Retired firefighter, yes, sir.
Yes, some of the this on the second reading, some of the questions that I had, or suspicions anyway, were, I think, answered. There's no way that with those other scientists that he did not have a relationship with them, and he may not have been a part of the Manhattan Project, but he certainly understood on what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I strongly suspect, I can't be completely accurate because I don't know for sure, but I would suspect, I wouldn't be surprised that they had no intent of dropping those bombs on those white people in Europe, that they were going to use it on non-white people who are called Japanese. Also, another report on what I heard in the second reading about the, I think it was called the Franco-Spanish War. I'm not sure on what it was identified as, but I had some prior study on it, and basically what it was with the white people who was quote unquote pro-fascist, the Nazis. They just used that war as a tune-up to strengthen the Luftwaffe, which is their air force, as was mentioned in the book, that, you know, they were dropping bombs on people, and that was kind of like the first armed conflict that did that in a quote unquote professional manner, massacre large amounts of people through the air. That war was a practice clinic for that. That's how white people think, and that's what they do. They actually love war so much, killing so much, that they actually practice it so one side can be more efficient than the other. The whole idea about non-white black people joining in on the process, I just chalk it up with the confusion that we have in the process of the global system of racist white supremacy. It's similar to what I've heard you say, and also was reported about black people searching, looking for some means of, well, it's terrible over here, let me go find some other place, because the black males who volunteered and participate, they didn't even want to come back home. They wanted to still keep themselves involved because the white people over there were being nice to them. That's basically it. They were being nice to them, and they were not being where they were from. The white people weren't as nice. Something as simple as that, which is something that we're going to have to learn better on, as far as the system of racist white supremacy, what it is and how it works. And that's all I would say. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. There are two quick notes I wanted to make sure I got in on page 72 really quick, and then we'll keep moving. Mel is including some of the notes that are pretty juicy, but not all. So if you have the book, just glance down from time to time. There are some interesting notes. This is one. It reads, although billed as a tribute that included American Indians, only 4 names of Native Americans were included among the 600 compared to 279 from Germany, 74 from England, and 42 listed as Negro. There was 1 name from China. Note 2, Paul Robeson made Ballad for Americans, written by Earl Robinson and John, is that Latouche? Latouche, we'll say? Latouche. An overnight sensation, singing it over CBS radio in November 1939, and the next year to overflow crowds across the country, more than 100,000 estimated in Chicago, and the largest attendance in the history of the Hollywood Bowl, emphasizing America's multiracial, multi-ethnic background and the need for equality. Man in white skin can never be free while his black brothers in slavery. The words also hailed the nation's potential. Our country's strong, our country's young, and its greatest songs are still unsung. And was considered patriotic enough to be sung, though not by Robeson, at the 1940 National Convention of the Republican Party. Isn't that amazing? They would take his song, and I think this was at the time when he was getting like a lot of flack, when like J. Edgar Hoover and company were like really sticking it to him, and couldn't have a passport, couldn't he make any money, couldn't take care of his family. Wow, that Paul Robeson, that's an amazing song. Thank you. We're not going to let you sing it, but it's an amazing song. We'll take it and play it at the Republican convention. Aren't those colored something with the music? And the footnote, this one is from the book Paul Robeson's Living Legacy. I don't remember that specific incident. I have to go back and look at Dr. Horn's biography to see if that was there specifically, that they just snatched his song for the fair and had it sung by somebody else, probably a white person, at the Republican 1940 convention. Yeah, I thought that was important. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share, proceed. perhaps while folks are getting their notes together, I'll share a few of the things that stood out from my notes, one or two, and then check in again. I'd said J. Edgar Hoover, I wrote that in the description, that he had both of these folks. They were keeping tabs, following, probably tapping their phones and having folks follow them around, recording their conversations. That was one thing I remember being specifically impressed by, or it stood out as being extremely significant when we read Dr. Horn's biography on Paul Robeson. They had so many like transcripts of conversations that he was having with folks, and they said they were checking his mail and everything. I mean, I say that all the time. It's not going to be any secrets in the system of racism. You didn't have, Alexa back then. So, I mean, with the advances in technology, like, wow. But it stood out. It was so many different times. He was traveling all over the world and talking to all these different people, and boop, exact to the word, to the apostrophe transcription of what Mr. Robeson was talking about today. Like, they can devote a lot of time and energy if you are important enough. Let's see. During his 46-year reign as the head of the FBI, said that building should be renamed. I just put that online. Hoover was often described as all-powerful, yet for all of Hoover's power, he could not have carried out his policies without tacit and often explicit approval of higher white officials. That word white should be there. As one leading Hoover biographer points out, we should read a biography on J. Edgar Hoover. His name has come up so many times over the years, and we talk about him so frequently, like a really good one. Like, I have to do some work on that to see if we can find a really good J. Edgar Hoover biography. Anyway, biographer points out Hoover's authority depended on powerful national leaders who shared the FBI director's obsessive anti-communist and anti-black and or white supremacist views, and yet sought to mask their own complicity and indifference to the law. I thought that was really important. It should have added those key words in terms of other powerful whites, because you certainly wouldn't have had a lot of powerful black people in positions of national power in the 1930s, 40s, even 2020. But having other white people who share his views and they don't want to be identified with a COINTELPRO type operation. We hate Marcus Garvey too, take him down, but we don't want to be identified with that, get it done. We hate, all of them really. Dr. King, Gusty, Renegade, anybody you could think of. Just get it done. On the same page, like a paragraph down, it says FBI ears were apparently not present backstage at the MacArthur when they're talking about when Einstein and Robeson met. And I thought back to Dr. Horn's book. I don't know. It seemed like maybe they were. I don't know. It seemed like they had pretty good surveillance. But it reads, in 1940, in an action that remained secret for nearly half a century, the FBI fed the U.S. Army a series of anti-Einstein memos. Unlikely that a man of his background could become a loyal American citizen, and based largely on those memos, Army intelligence denied Einstein security clearance, barring him from work on the Manhattan Project that built the atomic bomb. I thought, wow, if they were doing this about Einstein, I'm sure they would have had to have been doing this about other black people, like anybody. I mean, Marcus Garvey, like I said, Dr. King, anybody. Telling it, because I mean, particularly if you're overseas, you're in Vietnam or wherever the offensive is going to be, you're in Poland or wherever. How do you know what's happening around the world? You don't know. You just get whatever news they tell you about what's happening, or whatever person they want you to know about. So, yeah, and again, you didn't have a cell phone where you could just whip out and go online. Oh, okay, figure out what's happening anywhere in the world. You don't know. You're dependent on them for what they say. So, man, I'm sure that I am certain Albert Einstein is not the only person that they had some sort of anti or propaganda to try to neutralize and control how people think about a certain person. And I'm sure the black people, it would have been even easier. Let's see. Getting one more, and I'll double check, see if folks have any other thoughts. When they talk about this big speech that Einstein was supposed to, or had written to give at the World Fair in 1939, and then he wasn't allowed to give the speech, and he said, so this is after he gets his citizenship. It's a little bit further down. First, so he gets his citizenship in 1940, and he gives this, I guess, speech afterwards, and he says, in some countries, Men have neither political rights nor the opportunity for the free intellectual development. But for most Americans, such a situation would be intolerable. He already knows you have a substantial population of people who live in so-called America who have neither political rights nor the opportunity for free intellectual development. He knows that. He's been to Weatherspoon Street. He's not even being truthful. That's the sort of thing that would make us say, oh, yeah, this is just a typical racist man who is lying. And it's the same thing I was saying earlier on, where, one, he's not ignorant, but it doesn't really take a whole lot for someone who is classified as white to win the admiration of a black person, a non-white person, period. It doesn't really take a whole lot, you know, a few peanuts, hello. You don't have to do anything sometimes. You could just do nothing, and that might be enough, you know. You didn't call him a nigger. It's not an indictment of us. That's how we've been conditioned. That's what happens when you've been subjected to years, centuries of terrorism. That's what we normally expect from white people. So it's stunning in a positive way, unfortunately, when we meet someone who is not directly terrorizing us. I'll stop there. Other folks who are with us, hand up if you have comments to share.
Can I be heard?
Go ahead, man.
Our narrator.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So on page 66, there's a line that goes, although they probably did not know it, I think they were both being watched by the FBI. I think that's the line. And at first, the thought occurred to me that Einstein could have known that he was being watched, but a lot of people didn't know. So if I give him the benefit of the doubt, at the very least, Roosevelt knew, President Roosevelt. And there's so much discussion in this last chapter of him and Roosevelt talking back and forth about the bomb in 1939 before the war kind of officially starts. And so I think Roosevelt probably also knew that Himmler's associates were coming into the country. These Nazi people were coming to the country, hanging out with Hoover, and that, you know, we weren't supposed to send weapons as a country to Spain, but we were supposed to send them gasoline. And that, and the book just in so many aspects seems to unknowingly maybe touch on how much of World War II is just racist white supremacists playing both sides against each other. They always know, and yet they somehow don't. There's a section where I think Hoover's note is that he's going to put Robeson in a concentration camp. And the thought occurred to me, was that just Robeson, or was that like a large group of black people? Because it seems like they put random Japanese people, one entire ethnic group, in those concentration camps by themselves. So I kind of want to learn more about that DETCOM list that Robeson was apparently on that Hoover made. On page 69, there's an event called the Kristallnacht. I'm still not pronouncing that right, where they arrested 30,000 Germans. They killed, German Jews. They killed a lot of them. And it was described as a night of looting, incendiarism, and destruction caused by the Nazis. And it's just another example of all this looting that, you know, Nazis and white supremacists do. And yet we're kind of stuck with the stigma as looters. There is a thought that Firefighter in the last reading explained that it's just been in the back of my mind. The thought that, like, if he is such a genius, why doesn't he use his logic to fight white supremacy? And so I came up with, and I've just been developing this list because I told someone I was reading this book, and they're like, what more could Einstein have done to fight racism? And I was like, let me make a list and see if I can think of some things he could have done. I'm just going to do three of them. One of them was I think that he could have trained more black physicists and co-written papers for them because they say that he helped pay for black students to go to college. But I think, in my opinion, a co-written paper with Einstein is equally, if not more valuable in terms of helping black academics. Number two, I think he could have co-written a book about himself fighting racism with the help of a black librarian so that we don't have to guess at the motives for a white author in the 21st century. And number three, I think that while he succeeded in not wearing the equivalent of 1930s, 40s kente cloth sash, I think that he could have stood on the porches of the black people and protected them from the white drunken mobs. And that's all I have right now.
Oh, no. Comparing him to Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer doing the kente cloth, man. Woo, tough week for Einstein. Henry in Chicago.
All right. We're talking about in chapter 5, the bombing in Guernica, the bombing in Spain. At the end, it was talking. At the end of that paragraph, it was talking about how the Germans claimed that it was a military strike aimed at the town's single munition plant, but in fact, it was only part of Guernica and not touched by the destruction. Kind of reminds me of the drone warfare that the United States does against Muslim countries, basically bombing their areas, and they claim that they're terrorists there, but they hardly kill the terrorists, and they just kill the regular citizens. And I thought it was interesting about Hoover and Heinrich Himmler and the Nazis training the FBI or the police force, and seems like race soldiers around the world, unite, and even today unite. There has been Israeli forces have been training local police here to deal with non-white, especially non-white black people, because I guess they're using the same tactics they're using against the Palestinians. So race soldiers is not just communicating with people here. They are everywhere around the world. White supremacy, the system of white supremacy is a global thing. That's all I have in my line.
I have to look at my notes, but I think that because they do talk about that for Mel in California, where she was saying she wanted to get more information about Paul Robeson being on this DEFCON list to be detained. They do talk about that in Paul Robeson, Artist as Revolutionary. That's Dr. Horn's biography. And I'm trying to remember the coordination in terms of if like M16 or some of the different like enforcement agencies in other parts of the world, if they were coordinating. I'm just trying to remember if Dr. Horn talked about that, but it would seem like they would have had to have been. But yeah, either way, he does talk about that. He does give more detail about that in his book, and that's in Drugs as Weapons Against Us. That's a white author. He's been a guest on the program many times. I can almost see the book from here. It's right there. I think the cows even got a shout out in it, but he has a whole section on Paul Robeson and the COINTELPRO efforts and how the FBI drugged him. They gave him LSD. He thinks that he was exposed to LSD at least twice, and this caused him to have brain damage and drastically altered his health in an adverse manner. We had some of those audio clips included when we did our book study session on Dr. Horn's biography, but yeah, it's very important figure in terms of Paul Robeson, global figure, global system, both. Anybody else with comments they wanted to make sure they get in? Thought that was important in terms of Einstein's military connection. I mean, if he's writing the president, it took me a second to even say, like, does that mean the president of the university? Or like the president of the United States? Oh, he means the president of the United States. Like, okay, President Roosevelt. God, like, yeah, I would think if you're writing to the president, both with what Mel said, you could probably do a lot more about racism, white supremacy. I mean, if you're writing letters to the president and you've got Navy security clearance and all of this, you teach at Princeton University, like, wow, you can do quite a. You don't have to worry about being deported. You are a naturalized citizen now. So, yeah, he could have done a lot more training black students. He could have hooked the folks up at Witherspoon Street, like, big time. Publishing, as Mel said, I think a lot more. And particularly, you're a genius. Like, my goodness, allow your creativity to run wide, especially once you see that, oh, man, it seems like they don't want me to talk about this. I already know what happens when you don't talk about this, when you just try to be secret and just, let this go. Look at Nazi Germany, and now it's all over the world. Like, this becomes a big problem. Like, I need to speak up even more. Like, yeah, he could have done a lot more, a lot more. Let's see. Did I have other notes? Let's see. Let's see. As for the Negroes, the country still has a heavy debt to discharge for all the troubles and disabilities it has laid on the Negro's shoulders, for all that his fellow citizens have done and to some extent are still doing to him. To the Negro and his wonderful songs and choirs, we are indebted for the finest contribution in the realm of art which America has so far given to the world. And this great gift we owe not to those whose names are engraved on this wall of fame, but to the children of the people, blossoming namelessly as the lilies of the field. Now you talk about slow as driving Miss Daisy, like, wow. Those are the flowery words of Einstein with all the metaphors and what have you. Like, if this is the best that we're going to get, And even as I was reading all that, like, that's all the Negro has done is sing a few songs and the choir. Like, that's it. That's our contribution to the Northwestern Hemisphere is a few tunes. Kanye West is all right, but I mean, wow, that's it. We have woo. Maybe his counter-racism efforts are yet to come. So this is on page 73. Yes, this is on page 73. What I just read. So maybe his counter-racist exploits are yet to come. Maybe. Don't know. This book is not very long, too. I want to make sure I get that in. It's not a long book, so it's not like we have, months and months to go to maybe get lots of information. That is not the case. Now, there are some, I think, speeches that they have or letters that are included in the text, but it's not, this is not The Warmth of Other Suns. I'm already looking to say, oh, man, we got to pick another book soon because we'll be done relatively soon. So I don't know. Einstein is not standing up as John Brown. I mean, at least John Brown picked up a gun. I still suspect him of being a racist, and doesn't even seem like Einstein did too much of that. Anything else? Folks satisfied for this week's section? Make sure I have the audio correct so we don't have any wasting time next week.
Can I be heard again?
Retired firefighter.
Based on what you just said in reference to John Brown, I don't expect anything less from white people to do on the white people that they identify as being racist. Otherwise, don't come in our presence at all unless they're informing us that the system of racist white supremacy no longer exists. I mean, it just has to happen. And like you said, even John Brown did not complete that venture. So that's just my thoughts on white people who like an Albert Einstein and whatnot. The receipts of something other than just being nice is blank. It's blank. That's it.
Lots of nice white people. We still got the problem. Or I won't even say lots. I won't even say lots, but there have been a number of individuals classified as white who have been labeled as nice down through the years. We still got the plantation worldwide. Let's see. Folks satisfied? Anything else they need to make sure they get in?
Can I be heard?
Henry in Chicago. Yes, sir. Ooh.
So I guess in the first audio, I had mentioned that movie Einstein Light of the Power of Two and how crappy it was in regards to Einstein. And I think it was based off of fiction, I believe, but how Einstein didn't take that black girl under his wing and help her out in her work. So, but now that I think Mel was talking about Einstein not helping out any black potential scientists. I guess the movie's more accurate than I thought it was. So that's all. I'll meet my line.
They have lots of They have lots of information. Is there something that confirms all of this is accurate? Like he met somebody, maybe they're not named Lanny, but they got all this posted? With the, I was just at the Einstein light to the power of 2. With that, do they have information that he actually did hang out with someone named Lanny and all that? Or maybe not named Lanny, but I mean.
Were you referring to what, the reference I made about the movie?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I just got the synopsis from what was stated in the first reading.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to.
Because I guess apparently the synopsis is a black young non-white black child was having problems with science, and she knew Einstein, and Einstein was supporting her, but there was no reference of Einstein actually helping her out with her science. I mean, I might be wrong, but that's what I thought, was in the first audio.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're correct. I'm looking at the DVD. They have a picture of Einstein and then this black female. He's behind her. She's kind of leaning up against him a little bit. And then it's got a button that says, "I like Ike," on the front of it, which is interesting because we spent all that time talking about Roosevelt and his interactions with presidents and all that. And then it's got that. I don't know what that has to do with it. We need to watch this movie. We'll do this. This is an HBO offering, it looks like. That's what's on the top of this. So, yeah, Mel said she's down. We'll watch the movie for next week and do a little bit more information on this and see what the heck is going on here. Einstein, Light to the Power of 2. That's the full title. And I post like a 5-minute clip of it. But, yeah, we'll see if we can find the whole thing, and I'll post it, and then we'll do our homework and watch it for next week, and we'll add that to the conversation. Folks satisfied for this week?
Yes, Gus, you got the picture of Einstein being sworn in?
Is it on my email or
phone?
Let's see.
Also, because during the second reading, it reported that he was kicked off the secret list. I forgot what exactly called, but also Oppenheimer was eventually the person who was the principal person behind the atomic bombs. He got kicked off too, and primarily, it's always been inner fighting between white people. And they were concerned that they would relay the information to the white people who are called Russians, or the Soviet Union. And in turn, it already had happened because one of the scientists was a quote-unquote spy. And by the late 1940s, the Soviet Union had the access to knowledge of how to build, and they built one of these terrible destructive weapons. So,
got it. System of racism. Folks can think about that too. His justification for why he thought it was important to be involved to make sure that they beat the Nazis to the punch and getting the nuclear weapon. I don't really make a whole lot of him losing his clearance. The Army, they said they didn't trust him. They didn't think he'd be could be a good American citizen. He had Navy clearance, and then you're homies with the president. Then you're homies with other people working on the project. Like, I don't really think that matters that you don't have Army clearance. If you have Navy clearance, like, it's not really going to matter. Like, you're going to have more than enough white people who will hook you up and come right on in. Al, you're the man, and let's get your thoughts on this. And boom, boom. Yeah. Anywho, we'll chat it all out next week. We'll be back 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Anybody else, if you find the link for Einstein Light to the Power of 2, the whole thing, this is something that they probably have at the library, I bet. Like, if the library is back open in your area, you could probably go there and look. I bet you could probably, check this out. Probably watch it with your children, see what they think. But yeah, I'll see if I can nab a link to it so we can watch it for next week, and we'll resume our dialogue. And I guess we'll even get like a midweek edition where it won't be focused on this book per se, but we will have Dr. Horn on the program so we can talk about, some of this with regards to Mr. Robeson. Does he know about this book? Again, I don't think Albert Einstein is mentioned in that biography, so we can ask about that too. That'll be Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. With that, much obliged to everyone's participation. We will be here tomorrow, neutralizing workplace racism, talking about what has been another wacky week the past 7 days. We'll try to use logic, solve problems without creating new problems. Sobriety would be best. I think they slipped something in Mr. Robeson's drink. He was visiting someone. I think that's one of the incidents. They poisoned his a beverage that he had, and he had, severe problems because of that. But I mean, it's a lot of reasons to minimize alcohol, all of that, cigarettes, all of it, any of their narcotics and poisons we do not need. We want our brain computer working at maximum. That Paul Robeson, genius, all of the information that he had and experiences and talents, we do not want his brain computer working at maximum capacity. He might come up and figure out some things to cause us some serious problems. He's traveling the world. Oh man, make sure that's one of our primary activities. Make sure our brain computer doing everything we can to keep it working at maximum efficiency. In addition to being sober, let's be buckled up every time we are in a vehicle, passenger or driver. I would still say, Mel talked to us about the zaniness down in Sacramento. They are still protesting. I know in Wisconsin they called the National Guard. The Rona is still on the loose, they say. Lots of reasons to stay in the house. They have statewide mandated mask order in Washington now. Some people seem like they're taking it serious. Some people aren't. Lots of reasons to be in the house until things have stabilized a bit. If you are going to go out, super alert. Anything looks dangerous. White people look like they are looting, misbehaving, any antics. Get to safety immediately. Not worth it to take any risks with everything that's happening right now. If you're out, you are sober. You are buckled up. If you are driving, you are not on the cell phone. Again, just doing everything that we can to minimize contact with race soldiers. Badge or no. White people frequently are armed. In the system of white supremacy, we do not want to forget that in these days and times. Watch The Purge. Might need to see it again. It's been a while. Pick any one. Doesn't matter. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. No name calling. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.